Chapter 2:14. Although they did not continue to fight, the Gray Coat Army was still trapped in the valley. However, they were not in a hurry. After all, the initiative was in their hands. Now, they just needed to wait for the negotiators to come. The news of these young nobles being held captive quickly spread to the capital of Bran. Needless to say, it immediately caused an uproar. Of course, no matter how much they cursed and discussed, they had to be saved. It was not easy to raise a descendant, not to mention that some of them were the heirs of the nobles. However, the capital of Bran was thousands of miles away. Even with the help of magic, it would take a long time. After all, it was impossible to have a transmission array in this barren mountain. After a few days of celebration, the Gray Coat Army gradually began to calm down. The next step was to count the casualties and appease the survivors. These post-war matters were quickly put on the agenda. It could be said that this time, the Gray Coat Army's losses were still very heavy. Nearly 30,000 soldiers were transferred, but now, only a little more than half of them were left. If most of the people had not scattered and left, the number of casualties would have been far more than that. While the upper echelons of the Gray Coat Army were busy with these matters, Tang was also doing his own unfinished investigation. In the corner of the station, "Boss, this is the information about Bull." Misho handed over a stack of papers. While not bad, Tang reached out and took it, then asked, "How did you get this information?" "It's all inquired." "Boss, don't worry. We did it very secretly." The Gray Coat Army was only so big. It was easy to inquire about a person. Tang nodded. Among the members of the Gray Space, Misho was the most attentive and reliable. "Well, boss, this information seems to be useless now." Misho shook his head and spread out his hands. "Bull died this morning." "Die?" Tang was stunned and frowned. "How'd he die?" Bull's injuries were caused by Tang, and he knew it very well. Even if the blood chi exploded, it would at most paralyze, not be fatal. "I'm not sure. I heard that he committed suicide." "But—" Misho looked at Tang and hesitated. "There are rumors that Bull can't stand the pain of a broken leg, so—" Tang's eyes turned cold. Misho didn't tell him the whole story, but he could guess that the rumors were pointing at him. "All right, got it. Tell the brothers who are monitoring Bull to withdraw. Let's put this matter to rest for now. Inform everyone that the Gray Space will be training as usual tomorrow." "Yes." After Misho left, Tang fell into deep thought. Suicide? Well, that was possible. If a normal person couldn't accept the loss of a leg, it was reasonable for them to commit suicide. But if that wasn't the case, then things would be interesting. With Bolai's death, he could not continue the investigation. Moreover, with the deceased as the bigger picture, other people's attention would narrow down Bull's previous mistake and magnify the damage that Tang inflicted on him. There would even be rumors that he had killed Bolai. But even if that's the case, it doesn't make sense. Why are you slandering me so quickly? Have I interfered with any of your interests? He shook his head. These were only the most likely guesses. There was too little information for analysis to draw any useful conclusions. It seemed that the Gray Space still needed to be developed. Tang sighed and walked back. Now, more than 10 people were obviously not enough. They were now good at fighting, but they were not good at analyzing and summarizing information. Tang suddenly stopped. His nose twitched, and a familiar spicy smell drifted with the wind. This Tang turned to the right. After passing through a few passages, the spicy smell became stronger. "Try it. This is called hot pot. It can remove moisture and keep warm. It's best to eat in winter. It's unique to our Gray Coat Army." It's just pouring food into spicy soup. What's the big deal? A country bumpkin will always be a country bumpkin. Your lordship, have you eaten this country bumpkin's food?" I haven't eaten it, and I don't care to eat it." "I see. If you haven't eaten it, how do you know it's just pouring food into the spicy soup?" "Everyone try it." I promise you'll remember the taste." "Uncle Fry, do you want a piece?" Beside the bonfire in the distance, Josiah, dressed in a white robe, was trying his best to promote hot pot. As for the people gathered at the side, Tang recognized most of them. They were Fry and the other young nobles who had been captured. There were also some people he did not recognize. They were probably the ones Josiah had mentioned yesterday. Rosa had specially sent them to promote the Gray Coat Army. Ever since those young nobles came to the Gray Coat Army, they were free to move around. They were not chained up. Of course, this was not necessary. They could not break out of here no matter what. As for Fry and the others, they were even more free. Even if they wanted to leave now, no one would stop them. While he was thinking, Fry and the others had already started eating. Those young nobles disdained to eat such things. What kind of delicacies had they not eaten before? Why would they like this crudely made hot pot? Wow, this spicy tastes good. It's flavorful, it's clear. It'll be even better if there's wine. F***CK, skinny monkey, how dare you snatch mine? At this time of the year, hot pot was still very attractive. They had never seen such a cooking method before, such a strong taste. All these things made these northern men involuntarily shake off their arms and fight for the food in the pot. Those young nobles who were unwilling to eat at first could not help but take a few more glances when they saw Fry and the others fighting over the food in full swing. Country bumpkins will always be country bumpkins. You've probably never eaten anything good in your life. As he spoke, a young noble elegantly raised his knife and fork. I'll try it first, then I'll tell you what's really good. Huh? The young noble chewed the food in his mouth. His expression became a little strange, as if he wanted to vomit, but also as if he could not bear to. After a moment of hesitation, he finally swallowed it. How is it? The young noble beside him asked. It's just SOSO. The noble youth spoke slowly, but his hands did not stop moving. He continued to stick his fork into the boiling pot. The young nobles around him looked at each other and finally raised their forks. This taste is not bad. It's just like golden caviar bursting in my mouth. Yes, that's the feeling. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of metal clashing against metal rang out. Phew, just for this hot pot. Joining the Gray Coat Army is not a waste. Fry looked up at the sky and exhaled a mouthful of spicy air. Ha! Tang! And shook his head and chuckled. Joining the Gray Coat Army for hot pot was naturally a joke, but Tangan was still very excited when he heard Frey's intention. Hey, Arthur. Oh, Brother Tang In is here too. Come and try this hot pot. Fry saw Tang In standing in the distance and hurriedly called out to him. Josiah's heart skipped a beat when he heard this, and he hurriedly raised his head. Tang In happened to look over as well. Their eyes met, and their bodies trembled. Tang In then rubbed his nose, and Josiah hid his blushing face behind a mist. The scene from yesterday appeared in their minds at the same time. Brother Tang In, why are you still standing there? Damn, you bastards are still not. Be careful. Fry, who was in the middle of greeting him, suddenly changed his expression and shouted a warning. Tang In, who was walking over, also suddenly paused, and then an angry roar came from behind him. Tang In, give me back my uncle's life. If you like this work, you are welcome to come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 215. Tang In, give me back my uncle's life. The sharp sound of a sword piercing through the air rang out, right next to their ears. Tang In's figure suddenly rushed forward and crossed a few feet. Then he swung his arm back, and the blood-red dagger just happened to hit the tip of Green Glow's sword. Ding! The long sword curved in an arc and swung away. Tang In took the opportunity to turn around suddenly. Borg! It was Borg who was attacking with the sword behind him. Under the light of the green fighting energy, his originally handsome face looked somewhat sorrowful and ferocious. He pulled back the long sword and quickly stabbed it between Tang In's eyebrows. Die! The distance between the two was very short, but Borg did not even put on his fighting energy armor before attacking. Obviously, he was risking his life. Tang In opened his hands and stepped on the ground. His figure quickly retreated. Borg, what are you doing? To be honest, Tang In still did not understand the situation. He and Borg were old acquaintances. He did not expect Borg to suddenly draw his sword today. Green Glow's long sword was advancing fiercely, but Tang In's retreat was not slow either. Both sides maintained a shocking distance. Seeing that he was in front of Tang In, but he could not close the distance. Borg shouted sadly, "What am I doing? You killed my uncle. What do you think I am doing?" "Your uncle?" Bolai? Tang In finally reacted. He really did not have many enemies in the Grey Coat Army. The only one who was ruthless was Bolai. Bolai was Borg's uncle? No wonder. He was the first to rescue him in the tactical department last time. "Don't run." Borg did not bother to answer Tang In's question now. He focused on rushing forward with his sword. He hated that he was not a high-level warrior. Otherwise, he could definitely hit Tang In, who was close by, with his fighting energy. "Borg, you go to hell." Without waiting for Tang In to finish, Borg's eyes suddenly lit up. He let out a loud roar, and the light of his fighting aura rose again. His body was defenseless as he leaped into the air and pierced towards Tang In. It turned out that a tunnel wall had appeared behind Tang In, and he had nowhere to retreat. At this moment, Tang In suddenly stopped in his tracks. He was naturally aware of the situation behind him. His professional habit as an assassin had already allowed him to see his surroundings clearly. Shaking his head, Blood Ray raised the dagger from his side at a speed that seemed slow but was actually fast, accurately touching the blade of the sword. Bang! The tyrannical black meteorite essence and the extremely penetrating blood energy. The two merged into one and directly shattered the sword, turning it into small pieces of metal that scattered everywhere. Just as he was about to stab her, the long sword was shattered. Borg became even crazier. He actually let go of the hilt of his sword and pounced forward with his fists. Seeing that Borg had completely lost his mind, Tang In frowned and put away his dagger. Then he bent his fingers into a claw and accurately bit Borg's wrist, lifting him with his left shoulder. Swoosh! Borg's figure flew over his head and directly hit the other side of the wall that was a few feet away. Bang! Borg's strength was only at the beginner level of an intermediate martial artist. He was originally not a match for Tang In. Later, he lost his weapon and fought hand-to-hand with Tang In, who was proficient in close combat. Naturally, he was easily defeated. Borg, done, stop it. From the moment Borg was assassinated to the moment he was thrown out, it only took a few breaths. On the other side, Josiah had just recovered from his shock and hurriedly ran over while shouting anxiously. Borg, who was pressed against the wall, propped himself up. His eyes were blood red, and he roared and rushed forward without caring about anything else. F***CK. Tang In curled his lips and stretched out his hand to grab the incoming punch. He twisted his waist, stepped to the side, and swung his arm. Boom! Borg was thrown out like a cannonball again. You killed my uncle. You killed my uncle. Borg stood up amidst his frantic cries and rushed over again. The commotion here was not small. Gradually, a lot of onlookers from the Grey Coat Army gathered. They did not know what had happened here, so they whispered among themselves. "Hey, isn't that Borg? Who's the other person? I don't know. He looks unfamiliar. Killed his uncle? What's going on?" There's news that Officer Bull committed suicide this morning. If that's the case, then this person should be the leader of the gray space. His name is Tang something. You're making me more and more confused. Isn't the gray space our hero? How could they kill Borg's uncle? This matter is more complicated. I also heard it from others. It seems Tang In glanced around and frowned slightly. Borg's punch missed, and his body leaned forward uncontrollably. "Tang In, I'll kill you. I'm going to kill." "Tang, stop fighting." Bang! It was completely quiet. Tang In withdrew his palm expressionlessly. Borg collapsed and lay motionless on the ground. Josiah opened his mouth and stopped in his tracks. Tang and spread out his hands. "I'm fine. I'm just dizzy. How dare you?" With a sudden shout, Tang In's body spun rapidly. In an instant, layers of bloodlines covered his body. Then, a few colorful fighting lights rose from the crowd. "A life for a life. Tang In, you can't run away. How dare you kill my second brother? You'll die here today. Kill." Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, several silhouettes flew over from above and attacked Tang In one after another. It happened so suddenly that almost no one reacted. Fry and the others came back to their senses, but these fighting energy warriors attacked together. They were too far away and could not stop them. Storm! Tangen's eyes turned cold. His body disappeared, and the dense bloodlines began to revolve around the center. Hiss! The sound of knife cutting through the air could be heard. Ding, 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 bang, bang, bang. In the small pit, fighting energy was everywhere. Sword and knife energy flashed on the spot. Rumble! The nearest passage began to collapse. In an instant, mud and dust fell, and a turbid world appeared. The surrounding people hurriedly retreated, fearing that they would be affected. But soon, these fighting energy lights were covered. A blood-red whirlwind began to occupy this place, circling and wreaking havoc. The attacking swords and knives were quickly twisted and shattered as soon as they touched it. If they did not let go at this time, their bodies would be swallowed. Get out of here! In a violent roar, several figures spat out blood and rolled out of the dust in a sorry state. If someone was careful, they would be able to see that these were the weakest ones. There were still a few mid-level warriors fighting beside the whirlwind. Tangen's current situation was not very good. The storm skill was indeed powerful. It could be said that as long as one could control it, it would slowly grow stronger over time, but now he had activated it in a hurry. It was not strong enough to shake off several mid-level warriors in one go. If this continued, the storm would probably dissipate. Tangen narrowed his long and narrow eyes. Since this was the case, don't blame me for being ruthless. He spread his hands and roared angrily. Explode! 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 The red whirlwind suddenly stagnated and collapsed. Countless bloodlines were thrown out like flying scythes, radiating to the surrounding area. Boom! 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 The onlookers only saw the red light in front of them, as if they saw a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Then the uncontrollable blood-red sword light gushed out. It quickly engulfed everything around it. Fighting energy, tunnels, and mounds were all directly crushed, and this was not the end. The crowd was horrified to find that the bloodlight was spreading to the periphery. Not good. Fry pulled back Josiah, who was standing in a daze. Then he snatched a long spear, gathered his green fighting energy, and attacked it. Bang! Crash! Fry retreated in a sorry state. His long spear had just entered, but it was quickly twisted into pieces. Retreat, retreat quickly. He did not have a lightning spear in his hand now, so he could only call for everyone to retreat quickly. At this moment, stop. An order came from afar. Then an invisible pressure came down in an instant. The bloodlight's periphery seemed to be covered by a layer of light golden gauze, stopping it from moving forward. The blood-red sword light seemed to be unwilling to accept this. It continued to attack the golden gauze like ghosts. They were thirsting for slaughter, thirsting for blood. However, although the golden gauze was thin, it was like a chain that firmly clamped down on the bloodlight. No matter how it attacked, it still looked like water. Finally, the weak bloodlight began to thin out, shrinking the area it covered. Gradually, until it completely disappeared. A biting cold wind blew, and the dust was quickly washed away. The frightened crowd looked up and could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. The earth walls that used to separate the field were all gone now, leaving only a large flat depression. Oh, it was not too flat, because almost every inch of the ground was carved with deep and shallow spiral marks. Around the field, there were a few badly mutilated figures lying on the ground. From their twitching movements, it could be seen that they were not dead, but, in this situation where there was not a single piece of good flesh on their body, perhaps it would be better if they were dead. The two people in the field who were the least injured were the two in the middle. One was standing, and the other was lying down. The one who was standing was Tangen. Although he was swaying, his clothes were ragged, and he was in a sorry state. At least he did not fall down. The one lying down was the unconscious Borg. The center of the storm was also the weakest place, so he was lucky to have escaped the disaster under Tangen's feet. What are you doing? Is infighting fun? Do you still care about me, your leader, and the Gray Coat Army? Rosa, who was walking over from afar, looked at the messy scene with a sullen face. "Josiah, tell me what is going on." Aunt Rosa puff. Tang In spat out the blood in his throat, then let out a long sigh of relief, finally suppressing the churning blood in his chest. This kind of brute force explosion, without waiting for the storm to form, naturally had repercussions. Well, the repercussions were better than being broken by others. The last time Tang In was broken by a storm was when he was breaking out of the grassland. At that time, he was full of pain and had been unconscious for 2 days. Now it was better. There were only internal injuries and no external injuries. Tang In, who had recovered slightly, directly looked at the simple-looking man holding a sword behind Rosa. The man's face was as calm as water. He stood quietly at the side, as if he did not exist at all. But Tang In was clear in his heart that beneath the calm surface of the water, there were huge waves. The golden gauze that had locked the blood ray in place was released by him. At such a distance, with such domineering power, what kind of strength had this person reached? Revenge for Borg. Bull is dead? After listening to Josiah's story, Rosa's face was very shocked. Then, she looked at the surrounding scene and waved her hand. "Clean up this place and send Borg and the others back for treatment." "Well, ask Minister Bosco to come to my house later." Taking a deep breath, Rosa continued, "Tang In, how are you? Are you okay? Then come with me. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 216. What do you think of the Gray Coat Army? Rosa led Tang In through the passageway and out of the encampment, arriving at the empty valley outside. Other than the man with the sword, the rest of the people had retreated. In the distance was the bunker of the army soldiers. Rows of soldiers could be vaguely seen patrolling above. After Rosa came here, she kept looking into the distance, as if she was in a daze or reminiscing. After a while, she asked the question above. "What do I think of the Gray Coat Army?" Tang In was stunned. He thought Rosa would talk about the conflict just now. After all, he had crippled several intermediate warriors. This was not a small force in the Gray Coat Army. Moreover, most people with this kind of strength had important positions. Cough, cough, it's pretty good. The soldiers are brave, and the people support them. Yes, the future is bright, and the dreams are full. But the reality was cruel. "Oh, are you trying to coax me with this?" Rosa chuckled and glanced at Tang In. Hee hee. "Yes, but you're right about one thing." Rosa looked back at the encampment and nodded. The reason why the Gray Coat Army can come to this point is not without the support of the people. You may know that the food supply of the Gray Coat Army has always been a problem. Other than the food that is bought and exchanged, the rest of the food is voluntarily donated by the people. That is what they have left after paying the harsh taxes, and the soldiers of the Gray Coat Army, most of them are also from the people. Some of them have elderly elders or young children in their families, but they still came. Some of them even came with their brothers, and many, they have really contributed too much. But we have not repaid much. The last soldier's pay was only a dozen silver coins last year. Speaking of this, Rosa shook her head and laughed at herself. Sometimes, I feel that I am a failure. Leader, there's no need to belittle yourself. What you've done is already good enough. This time, Tang In was not trying to coax him. Although his academic results in the future were always average, he knew that throughout the history of the Celestial Empire, other than a few times, which other rebellion had ever succeeded, Rosa had led the Gray Coat Army for more than 10 years. He had led the defeated army to its current state with tens of thousands of soldiers. He had also successfully evaded the government's encirclement 5 or 6 times. This achievement, no matter where it was enough to be proud of. Maybe, but it's still not enough. Our enemy is too strong. If we don't see the light of dawn tomorrow, we might be wiped out today. Tang In was silent. This was a fact, and it was not easy to comfort him. The Gray Coat Army was fighting for the interests of the commoners, so it was inevitable that they would clash with the aristocracy of the other world. The royal family of Bran was one of the largest aristocratic families in the world. Therefore, it could be said that the Gray Coat Army was fighting against a national machine. The difference between the strong and the weak was obvious. That's why we have to continue to grow stronger. Your idea of the poster is very good. It's not enough to just do that. We need to let more people know about us. They need to know that there's a group of people who are not bandits, like the officials say. They have always been fighting for the interests of the common people. Rosa raised his fist and waved at the sky. His tone was firm. Of course, to do all this, I alone is far from enough. Rosa paused and suddenly pointed at the army and said, "Do you know General Z of the Zechen Legion?" I know him." Tang In was stunned for a moment before he replied, I know him. Well, it's not just you. Almost everyone in the Empire knows him. Everyone knows that Z always wins battles. Soldiers who follow him to the battlefield will only receive glory. Hee. There was once when I heard old General Omeng say that even if Z.E. were to lead a group of hooligans, as long as he said that we would win before the battle, those hooligans would even defeat a regular army. This is a kind of belief and also a kind of charm. This is what the Gray Coat Army lacks. Tang In shook his head and said, "No, I believe that in the hearts of all the Gray Coat Army members, Leader Rosa has this kind of belief." Me? Hee. Rosa shook his head and laughed. "It's not that I overestimate or belittle myself. I know that I am very useful. I know that my head is worth millions of gold coins. But I still can't do this kind of belief. This is a world with a strong praise on the weak. I am a woman. I don't know martial arts, and I am not proficient in battlefield strategy. I have tried to learn, but limited by my talent and energy, I have never been able to do it. This has limited me." Tang In didn't refute. What Rosa said did make sense. She was undoubtedly a spiritual leader, but relying on her spirit alone was not enough to defeat a strong enemy. When I realized this problem, I began to look around for this person. But unfortunately, I couldn't find him. Some of them were just a little bit lacking. Until Rosa suddenly turned around and stared straight at Tang In with her brown eyes. "Until I met you, Tang In, are you willing to stand up and be this belief, this hero?" Tang In suddenly opened his mouth wide. He pointed at himself and looked at Rosa blankly. "Me? Hero?" Tang In admitted that at this moment, he was indeed shocked. "That's right. Although you have only joined the Gray Coat Army for a short time, you have done a lot. Darren told me about what happened during their escape. Without you, their small team wouldn't have made it here alive. Then, you discovered the Ashen Flame Army and forced the Gray Coat Army to break out of the encirclement in time, avoiding a huge loss. After that, you led the Gray Space Army and escaped from the encirclement with more than 10 people. Do you know? At the celebration party 2 days ago, your members told us everything that happened along the way, turning the celebration party into a place to listen to stories. And not only did you successfully escape, but you also went deep into the enemy's rear and captured the noble captives. Not only did you solve our current encirclement, but you also benefited the Gray Coat Army greatly. Do you know how the people outside see you? Mysterious, legendary, and more importantly, you've never failed up to now. That's right, these are not enough. It is not easy to be a hero, but please believe me, I have prepared for a long time. As long as you agree, I am confident that I can create a hero." The speechless Tang In couldn't help but touch his nose. Then, he changed his hand and touched it again. Gray Coat Army's base, Bosco's tent. Borg used a cloth to wipe the water stains on his face. Without a doubt, the way he woke up early was very obvious. Putting down the wet cloth, Borg looked depressed. "Father, I failed. We couldn't kill Tang In to avenge Uncle and the others." Bosco, who was sitting behind the table, looked calm. He just nodded when he heard that. "Well, I already know this. I didn't expect Tang In's martial arts to be so high. He wasn't so powerful before." Borg frowned, looking very puzzled. "I don't know why, but his strength has improved very quickly. It's almost like he is advancing every day." Borg's mood was gloomy. Even though Twain was very powerful when he first met him, he thought that he could still see how powerful Tang In was. But now, Borg had no idea what level Tang In had reached. In comparison, he looked at himself. He was a beginner intermediate warrior at the beginning, and now he was still a beginner. Am I not as hardworking as him? Or am I not as talented as him? But no matter how hard he thought, he wouldn't know that all of this was due to the killer space. So in the end, this young man, who was born in a noble family and had always been very confident, fell into confusion. Don't make wild guesses. The cultivation of fighting spirit isn't something that can be achieved overnight. He may have better talent than others or some other fortuitous encounter, but he will always encounter a bottleneck. Speaking of this, Bosco narrowed his eyes. What's more, to what extent can a person's martial arts reach? 100 enemies? 1,000 enemies? You have a unique talent in tactics. Make good use of your advantages and be at 10,000 enemies. Then you can suppress him. I know, I will work hard. Bosco's words aroused Borg's confidence. Well, good. Bosco nodded. That's more like the heir of the Elvis family. By the way, since you have missed the opportunity, you're not allowed to find trouble with Tang in the future. Even if he provokes you, you can't make a move. Do you understand? Borg said in a deep voice, I understand. Before I have enough strength, I won't give him the chance to kill me. Good, well, go work hard. Well, father, I'll go out first. Borg bowed and walked to the tent. But before he opened the curtain, his hand paused. After a moment of hesitation, he gritted his teeth and turned around. Father, I have one more question. Oh? Go ahead. Bosco raised his head. Did Uncle really commit suicide? Bosco put down his quill and looked at Borg with a frown. In an instant, the room fell into silence. Why do you ask? After a moment, Bosco said quietly, Haven't you seen Uncle's body? The hit on the head was fatal, and blood was found on the corner of the table. Why? Do you think it was me who did it? No. Borg lowered his head and avoided Bosco's eyes. It's good to have doubts, but you have to have a starting point. What can I gain by killing Uncle except for losing my family? I'm sorry, Father, I thought too much. Borg breathed a sigh of relief, and then his face was full of shame. It's good to think too much, but you have to think thoroughly. Bosco closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. He waved his hand. If there's nothing else, you can leave. Okay. Borg bowed again and left the tent. A faint sigh sounded, and Bosco opened his eyes. It's good to think too much, but you have to think thoroughly. Borg, it's obvious that you didn't think thoroughly. Well, it's not your fault. After all, you don't have enough information. Humph, to be a hero, you have to bear the infamy of forcing people to die. Let's see how you could be a hero. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 217. There's a kind of person in this world. They were resolute, courageous, and fearless. They dared to do what others did not dare to do, and dare to take on what others did not dare to take on. They could turn the tide and help the building to collapse. We call them heroes. This was a title accumulated by tens of millions of believers. It was also the glory that all warriors yearned for, and one after another would strive to obtain. Heroes did not matter where they came from. As long as the soil and environment allowed it, they could amaze the world with a single brilliant feat and shine with dazzling brilliance at the critical moment. Of course, it was easier said than done, and it was even harder to be a hero. In addition to having certain physical conditions, timing, luck, and so on were also indispensable. There would be heroes in every era, but not every era would have a hero. This was timing. Everyone wanted to be a hero, but often a cold arrow shot out from the crowd. It was common to die before achieving victory. This was luck. Now, a ready-made opportunity to become a hero was placed in front of Tang Yin, and all he needed was an insignificant nod of approval. Coupled with the motivational words from before, Rose's firm gaze at this moment seemed very convincing, but few. Tang Yin let out a long sigh and shrugged. Sorry, everyone wanted to be a hero, and Tang Yin was no exception. But it was important to know one's own limitations. Although it was indeed quite contemptible to say that one could not do it before doing it. But when Tang Yin thought of standing in front of tens of millions of people often in the future, encouraging with his voice and accepting the tsunami-like cheers of the crowd. TSK, TSK. This feeling really gave him goosebumps just thinking about it. It could be said that if Tang had encountered such a choice when he had just arrived in the other world, he might have agreed on the spur of the moment. But after receiving systematic training for a long time, the killer's habits had long been ingrained in his bones. Now that he had to stand in the open, his first thought would definitely not be to give a speech, but to find a way out. Oh, why? Rose's expression was not much surprised. She said, "You didn't go to the celebration party previously. Well, do you think there's something in the Gray Coat Army that you can't stand? The matter of Bull. It's not about that." Tang shook his head and spread his hands. "You want me to be a hero, but I don't know what to do." "That is not a problem." Rosa shook his head and said confidently, "Like I said at the beginning, I am ready. You don't have to do anything, or rather, you can continue to do what you're doing. You only need to step up at certain times and use your strength to resolve certain situations." "Strength?" Tang rubbed his nose and pointed at the simple-looking man holding a sword behind him. "If we're talking about strength, this guy can easily defeat me." Zwafan, Luo Sha, shook his head. "He can't. He has a special condition. He's not good with words. No wonder TSK, TSK. Her temperament has no sense of presence to begin with, and she doesn't like to talk. If he stood in front of everyone, he would be treated as a passerby." Luo Sha looked at him seriously again. "So, you're the most suitable candidate. But I really can't do it." Tang scratched his head helplessly. "Take the matter of Bull as an example. When I was being chased, I thought that if I could make it back, I would definitely ask for an explanation from the person who issued the task. If I were a hero, I would have to weigh the pros and cons in my heart first. I know myself. I am not a petty person. I am a vengeful person. How could such a person be suitable to be a hero?" Speaking of this, Tang Un's heart suddenly moved. "Actually, I have a candidate in mind. She is quite suitable for this." "Oh, Josiah." "Josiah?" Luo Sha raised his eyebrows, but did not refute at once. "Yes, you see." Tang opened his palm and said one by one. "First of all, she is a magician. Although her strength is slightly weak now, her future potential is limitless. Moreover, being a magician is a profession with a long lifespan. This means that she is destined to be a strong person. Moreover, she understands and supports the ideals of the Gray Coat Army. She is also good at encouraging others. Lastly, she is of noble birth. She does not have that. She does not have the limitations of a commoner's thoughts. TSK, TSK. If I train her to be a hero, the future of the Gray Coat Army will be bright." Damn, I really admire myself. I even believed what I said. Limitations of a commoner's thoughts? What is that? Luo Sha's eyes suddenly lit up. He asked, "Can you be more specific?" "Usually when I lead people to do some things, I do feel that I am not as capable as I would like to be. Is this the limitations of a commoner's thoughts?" Tang touched his nose and said, that. Leader, pay attention to the main point. As for the limitations, let's talk about them later." Damn, I overdid it again. How would I know what the limitations are? I only know that every time in the history exam, when summarizing the reasons for the failure of the peasants' uprising, as long as I add this sentence, it will not go wrong. Luo Sha was stunned for a moment. He then nodded and sighed. It seems that you really don't want to be the hero of our Gray Coat Army. It's not that I don't want to, it's that I can't do it. But leader, don't worry. Even if I don't want to be a hero, I will do my best to do something for the Gray Coat Army. Josiah is my friend. I will also help her. Just friends. Tang, opened his mouth. He was stunned. Ahem. Luo Sha cleared his throat and then said seriously, "All right, I will consider your suggestion." That's good. Tang nodded, confused. Why did Leader Luo Sha feel like he was gossiping? But then he threw this thought to the back of his mind. He allowed a long sigh of relief. Finally, he didn't have to be a hero anymore. Sigh. Why do I always think of martyrs when I think of heroes? All right. Luo Sha touched his forehead as if he had thought of something. He said seriously, In view of the great contribution of the Gray Space this time, we have decided to promote the Gray Space Squad to the level of a division. There will be 200 people in total. You will still be responsible to me. Tang En was overjoyed when he heard this. He quickly bowed and said, "Thank you, leader." He was just thinking of finding a time to talk about increasing the number of people in the Gray Space Squad. He didn't expect the leader to agree to it first. As for the promotion of the Gray Space Squad, it was probably to prevent a similar situation from happening again. The division level was only second to the ministry level. There were not many people who had the power to mobilize Tang En and the others. "All right, leader. I might have to go out for a while due to some personal matters." Old Bill's matter had always been on Tang En's mind, and he had long decided to send the money over as soon as possible. Luo Sha didn't ask much. He nodded and said, "All right. When will it be? I will write a letter to ask the soldiers to clear a path for you." The Gray Coat Army was still stuck in the middle. If they wanted to get out, they would have to go through the checkpoint where the soldiers were surrounded. Of course, other than the fact that large-scale movement of people was not allowed, there were no other problems. Let's do it tomorrow. Tang En thought for a while. He still felt that it was better to settle this matter as soon as possible. So soon? That's good too. You have to make it in time for the negotiation. Okay. Tang En smiled and bowed. "Leader, if there is nothing else, I will go back and prepare." He should leave quickly. If he doesn't bring up the limitations later, I will be finished. Sigh. Watching Tang En's figure quickly disappear into the tunnel, Rosa suddenly let out a long sigh, and then shrugged helplessly. You guessed right. He rejected it. He's an assassin. He won't choose to be a hero under the sun. Somehow, the man called Zwafan had appeared behind Rosa. Maybe. Actually, it is quite strange. His understanding of the Gray Coat Army's ideology is very thorough, even more thorough than mine. If I didn't meet him, I really wouldn't dare to believe that there is someone in this world who has a deeper understanding of this aspect than me. This is simply born with knowledge. But this makes me feel that it is a pity. Strength, achievements, ideas, he has them all. But he is not willing to be a hero. Sometimes I even think that he thinks that the Gray Coat Army has no future. That is why he is not willing to stand out. Everyone has their own ambitions. You cannot force him. Zwafan said calmly. Besides, this will not affect anything, right? You already had plans to train Josiah. You could just continue with it. That is the only way. Luo Sha nodded. Josiah is indeed a very good choice. Phew, I don't know how to put it, but I have a feeling that this Tang En has something. How do I put it? He can always see beyond our line of sight and think of new ideas. That is why he can always turn danger into safety. It is as if he is blessed by the god of light. Luo Sha could not think of a word to describe it. In the end, he could only attribute it to the god. All right. Luo Sha turned around and said, "Let's not think about it anymore. At least Josiah will have his support, right?" Zwafan nodded silently. "By the way, Twain just suggested that you be the hero, Zwafan," Rosa said with a smile on his face. Zwafan's calm face was a little surprised. "Unfortunately, you are too shy. You are already so old. Why are you still not talking to others like when you were young? TSK. I haven't seen you smile in these few years." Smile? Luo Sha's smile widened. At last, his face was full of mischief. Zwafan looked at Luo Sha, who was so close to him. His mouth twitched, and he turned his head to the side. "Hey, why are you hiding? Smile, Wusha." Luo Sha opened his mouth and looked at Zwafan, who was flying into the sky and quickly turning into a small black dot. TSK. So what if you can fly? If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 218. Generally speaking, the Gray Coat Army was still very united. Of course, there are also some personal grudges, but they would usually be eased after mediation by the higher-ups. Fighting in public was still relatively rare, not to mention the kind of vigorous battle between Dochi martial artists. Therefore, when Tang En crippled a few intermediate warriors in public, The news quickly spread throughout the base. Then, the matter of him causing a ruckus in the battle tactics department was also dug up. The reactions of the ordinary people towards this were two extremes. One was that they admired Tang's superb strength. The other was that he was using his martial arts to bully others. Of course, the latter was fewer. Because the gray space had just made a great contribution, their prestige was still there. Some who knew the inside story reminded themselves that if it was not necessary, it was best not to provoke the gray space team, which only had a dozen people. Of course, no matter what they thought. After Tang In and Rosa finished talking, he walked in the base. He felt that the passers-by's eyes were faintly looking over and whispering about something in the distance. Under such circumstances, it was naturally not suitable for him to walk around. Tang In simply returned to the house. Naturally, he did not know that there were some new changes in the situation after that. Unknowingly, some news of him forcing Bo Lai to death secretly spread in the base. Of course, the content did not mention the mistakes that Bo Lai had made before. The main point was how ruthless Tang's methods were. In the end, Bo Lai could not accept it after he woke up, and then how pitiful the orphans and widows were. TSK, the content was really sad, and the people who heard it shed tears. Because the method of spreading was rather secretive, this rumor did not have any effect for a while. Tang did not know about this situation. Of course, even if he knew, he would not care. It was better that Bo Lai was dead. It would save him the trouble of not being able to find any concrete evidence. In the end, he would have to do it himself. The next morning, the sky was bright. Tang brought more than 10 people from the gray space team out of the base. They braved the heavy fog and went straight to the army camp in the east. In the mine, if it were not for Old Bill, Tang In and the rest would not have been able to come out, and they would not have been lucky enough to capture the group of noble youths. Therefore, no matter what, Tang In had to fulfill Old Bill's last wish. Old Bill's hometown was Shea Village, located in the east of the base. There were signs on the simple map that Tang In carried in his arms. It was probably near the former mine. The distance wasn't too far, and they could reach it in half a day. "Boss, they saw us." David pointed at the soldiers in front of them. Tang In pursed his lips. "So what if they see us? We're the bosses now. Let's go straight through." Whoosh! A moment later, a sharp arrow was inserted in front of Tang In. "Who are you?" "Those who want to pass. Call your manager out." "Step, step, step." Amidst the scattered footsteps, several small groups of soldiers formed an arc and surrounded Tang In and the others. "Gray Coat Army? What are you doing here?" one of the captains asked with an ugly expression. Both sides were still fighting to the death a few days ago. In the end, they were even ambushed by Tang In and the others from behind. Naturally, they wouldn't be polite. David took a step forward and pursed his lips. "You don't need to know why we're here. Find someone who's in charge. We're going over." Similarly, the Gray Coat Army had lost more brothers in this battle than the other side. One of David's friends had died in this battle. Naturally, he wouldn't be polite to the other side. "How dare you?" Soldiers were all hot-blooded. The captain obviously didn't have a good temper. He glared at David and said, "You're just a lowly gray coat citizen. You want to see our commander? Go back to where you came from." "Yo, you're quite arrogant." David clicked his tongue and gestured with his finger. "Do you dare to pick one? Your master David will only use one hand." Tang In shook his head lightly, but didn't say anything. David was obviously trying to stand up for his dead friend. Of course, he wouldn't stop him. "Damn it, these lowly gray coat citizens are too bold. Captain, teach him a lesson. Teach him a lesson." David's arrogant attitude attracted a lot of hatred. The other side's soldiers immediately became rowdy. "Haha, you said it yourself. Don't blame me for being too ruthless when the time comes." The captain laughed sinisterly and raised his spear. These soldiers naturally knew that both sides had stopped fighting. Under such a delicate situation, if there were any more casualties, it might become a new fuse. But even if the other side provoked them, as long as they didn't kill them, there wouldn't be any problems. "You're so long-winded. If you want to fight, come quickly. I still have to hurry on my way later." David raised his sword with one hand and said proudly, How dare you? Straight forward. The captain roared and quickly stepped forward. Chi! The spear was pointed at David's chest. David stepped to the side and swung his sword. Bang! The spear and sword clashed, making a loud sound. This attack was just a test. Then, the two of them started a fight in the field. Whoosh! The surrounding soldiers naturally cheered for them. Tang glanced at them and nodded. In terms of battle energy cultivation, David's current strength was the highest among the members of the Gray Space. Under Tang's training, his attacks were not like before, where he only used brute force. As for the captain, although his cultivation was not high, he was very experienced. Every attack was aimed at David's weak points. That was the left side of his chest. After all, David was fighting with one hand, so there were bound to be some problems with his body coordination. Ah, Captain, come on a little faster and you'll hit this kid. What's the point of just dodging? If you have the ability, don't move. It turned out that after the captain found out David's strength, he immediately launched a round of attacks. His spear was pointed at David's left side, but unfortunately, he missed by a little each time. It would be a joke if the captain said that he didn't dodge. He just wanted to take the opportunity to disrupt David's mood and rhythm. Okay, David, stop playing. Tang suddenly curled his lips and said, Haha, okay. David, who seemed to be in a sorry state, suddenly laughed. Then his body shook and his hands swung down heavily. Whoosh and a whistling sound. The sword did not arrive, but the wind pressure had arrived. The captain was shocked. He naturally knew what this sword whistling meant. It would only be produced when the strength reached a certain level. He did not care about attacking. He hurriedly raised his hands and blocked with his spear. Get lost. Boom! The captain was smashed to the back with his spear like a cannonball. Bang, 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 at the back were the soldiers who were cheering. They did not expect the situation to reverse so quickly. They only felt darkness in front of their eyes and were smashed to the ground by the captain. Ha ha ha! David's move was intentional. Seeing the other party fall into a ball, he immediately laughed mockingly. Damn it, you brothers go. Damn it, this is too much. Leave them here. The captains of the other two squads saw that they were defeated so miserably. They felt ashamed and immediately gave the order to attack. Whoosh, whoosh, but before they could lift their spears, their bodies flew out like clouds and fell to the ground. Bang, bang. Think carefully before you speak. Tang stood in front of the two captains and said indifferently, I can say very responsibly that if there is a problem, you won't be able to shoulder it. The surrounding soldiers were shocked. They did not see anyone come over just now, and the captain was easily taken down. What did this mean? This meant that as long as the other party was willing, taking their heads would be as easy as taking something out of his pocket. What happened here? Ta-ta. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a rush of footsteps. Gradually, a dense crowd of people appeared in the fog. When they got closer, they saw an officer in mail armor striding in front. Behind him were some soldiers scattered around. In the middle of them were some men in cloth clothes. Boss, in the middle are our brothers from the Gray Coat Army. Today, they seem to have agreed to exchange prisoners. Michaud came over and said, Tang, and nodded to show that he understood. The two sides have been fighting for more than 10 days, especially the recent fierce offensive and defensive battles. Naturally, some of the enemy's injured soldiers were captured. In fact, the Gray Coat Army had the terrain advantage and had more prisoners. Sir, a soldier quickly came forward and explained the situation. The officer nodded and walked in front of Tang and the others. Do you have a pass? Yes. Tang reached out and took out the letter written by Rosa and handed it over. The officer opened it and looked at it, then nodded. Okay, you can pass. After saying that, he stretched out his hand in front of Tang and, let's get to know each other. I'm from the Thunderbolts Army. Tang also stretched out his right hand casually and held it with both hands. The officer's expression suddenly changed, and he could not continue what he was going to say. The officer originally wanted to show Tang his strength so that he could get back at him. Unexpectedly, as soon as he exerted his strength, he felt a strong force coming and directly turned his strength into nothing. Good. The officer looked up at Tang in seriously and then took a deep breath. Chi-Chi, a dazzling red light, suddenly burst out from his arm. His fighting aura flowed and kept attacking Tang In. Tang In's movements were much smaller. Only when he got closer could he see traces of blood-red light through the gaps between his 5 fingers. The surrounding soldiers immediately focused their gazes. From the outside, their officer undoubtedly had the advantage. The fighting aura level of both sides was not on the same level. However, the person involved did not think so. The officer only felt that his fighting aura could not pass through it all. On the contrary, his palm was constantly tingling, as if he was holding a plant full of barbs. Raising his eyebrows, Tang In said with a smile, "Let's get to know each other. My name is Arthur." The officer's body trembled, and he cried out involuntarily, "Arthur!" Naturally, they had heard of this name before. Just a few days ago, the owner of this name swaggered away the captives in front of their general. Under such circumstances, there was naturally no need to be ruthless. While the officer was still in shock, Tang In was the first to let go of his hand. The officer looked deeply at Tang In, then turned around and waved his hand. "Let him go. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 219. Since the Gray Coat Army could not get back at them for a while, and since the Gray Coat Army had the ultimate weapon that could decide the life and death of the young nobles, Twain and company would naturally be allowed to leave. After passing through the army's camp, the Gray Coat Army sped up and headed straight for Shea Village. Not long after, they passed through the valley. When they saw the collapsed mine, they couldn't help but sigh. At noon, at the top of the hill, Twain looked into the distance from his vantage point and finally saw a group of residential areas in the mountains. Next to it was a small river. "Boss, this should be the place." Bill said that there's a dark yellow river near the village. Because there's sand in it, it's called Shea Village. David covered his eyes with his hand and pointed into the distance. His house is at the west end of the village, under the biggest old locust tree. Tang In pressed the coins in his pocket and nodded. "Okay, let's go." Naturally, announcing the funeral wasn't pleasant, but at this point, Tang In and the others could only give more money and hope that the mother and daughter would be settled down. But at that moment, Luke narrowed his eyes and suddenly said, "Hey, boss, something doesn't seem right, huh?" Tang In, who was walking down the hill, turned his head in surprise. "What's wrong? This village seems empty. It shouldn't be like this at this time." Luke's eyesight was outstanding, and he could see further than ordinary people. At that moment, he saw the clues of the mountain village in the distance. "Hey, maybe they're eating lunch at home," David said casually. "Well, maybe that's the case." Luke's expression was hesitant, and his tone was uncertain. While they were talking, a few black dots suddenly flew out of the mountain village in the distance and soared into the sky. "That's Vulture, it's Vulture." Luke was the first to speak. Tang In's face changed slightly, and his heart sank. "Hurry up, let's go." After he finished speaking, he quickly ran down the hillside. As David stepped forward, he scratched his head and asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" On the side, Micho's face was a little ugly. "Idiot, think about what vultures like to eat. Rotten meat." Micho probably knew that David didn't understand, so he answered his own question. No, it can't be. In such a remote village, there would not be much rice and flour. How could the poor people leave their meat to rot and attract so many vultures at once? Even if David was a fool, he would know that something was wrong. The distance between the hill and the farm was still quite far, but Tang In and the others sped up. In less than 2 hours, the mountain village was already in sight. The closer they got, the uglier their expressions became. There was still no sign of human habitation in front of them, and some of the outer wind-blocking walls had been pushed down. Suddenly, Tang In, who was running at the front, frowned and his nose twitched. F***K. F***K. This smell is... A member of the gray space also noticed this, and his expression quickly changed, unable to continue speaking. The cold wind continued to howl, but this time, not only did it bring cold, It also brought with it a faint stench. A moment later, Tang In and the others stopped outside Shay Village. The village was still silent. Oh, it was dead silent. The outer ruins were covered with traces of fire, but there was no black smoke at this time, perhaps because it had been a long time. At this point, the putrid stench that made people want to vomit became even more intense. Tang In exhaled a long breath and said in a deep voice, "Let's go." After that, he walked to the entrance of the village first. The members of the gray space silently followed behind. There was a mill at the entrance of the village, but the windmill was still motionless in such a strong wind. The reason was very simple, because there were a few civilians gently swaying on the wooden leaves of the mill. Their clothes were torn, and their mouths and eyes were empty. They seemed to be praying, crying, and complaining, but more than a dozen arrows had already pierced through their chests, depriving them of the right to speak. Ha! Ha! The eyes of the members of the gray space were about to burst, and their mouths were letting out muffled roars. Their tightly clenched fists were constantly making the sound of bones rubbing against each other. They seemed to be able to see these commoners being forcefully hung on the windmills. Then, more than 100 feet away, there were some beasts knocking arrows on their bows, teasing each other to see whose aim was better. Then, they would release the arrows. The commoners' bodies would sway and wail, while there would be crazy laughter from the other side. After passing the mill on the road behind them, at the corner of the wall, on the fence, old people, strong men, naked women, young children, one by one, the corpses maintained the painful expressions and movements from when they were alive, frozen there. Flutter, rustle, rustle, as Tang In and the others silently barged in. Some vultures and carrion beasts that were eating their fill scurried away. Tang In's footsteps paused and silently walked to the right. There was a vulture here that seemed to be extremely hungry, and it was still pecking at the corpse of the old man below it with its sharp beak. He walked more than 10 meters like a ghost, bent down, and reached out. Crack! The vulture's slender neck was twisted to the side and casually thrown away. Tang In looked at the old man's wound expressionlessly, and then reached out to flip open his clothes. After a short while, Tang In covered the old man's eyes and nodded thoughtfully. "Boss!" David walked up, his eyes red, and his face full of grief and indignation. Tang In waved his hand. "Let's go to Bill's house first." The farm was not big, and after walking a few steps forward, Tang In and the others saw a thick old locust tree. Winter was coming, and most of the branches and leaves on the tree had fallen off, leaving only some thick tree trunks and people hanging on them. Tang In looked up and saw a young man hanging on the tree. He shook his head, pushed open the half-closed wooden door, and entered Bill's house. The house was in a mess, and the cupboards and cabinets were pushed to the ground, as if they had been ransacked. However, there were no corpses inside. After passing through the big house, there was the backyard and the woodshed behind it. Broken pottery tiles lay on the side. The door of the woodshed was broken, and only one side of it was still hanging in the air, swaying with the wind. Tang In walked up to take a look, and his eyes narrowed slightly. On the left side of the woodshed, there was a young woman in plain clothes, and her delicate face was full of pain. Her red clothes were almost completely torn apart. Her white skin was full of bruises, and her lower body was in a mess. The fatal wound was on the left side of her chest, where a rusty steel knife was inserted in the place where the source of breast milk was supposed to be. Bang! Dust flew everywhere. Huff! 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 David punched the wall, and then he grabbed his hair and squatted on the ground, panting like an injured beast. Needless to say, the young woman who was tortured to death was undoubtedly Bill's daughter-in-law. Tang In took off his black shirt and spread it over the young woman's body, stepped back, and bowed deeply. He took a deep breath and called out, "Michelle, here." Michelle walked out and said in a deep voice, "Take a few people and find the bandits nearby. I don't care what method you use, but in 2 hours, I want to know everything that happened here." "Yes." Michelle nodded and quickly led a few people out of the courtyard. "David, here, take the others and search the farm. If there are no survivors, bury the villagers' bodies together. Okay. David lowered his head and took the rest of the people out. Bill, I'm sorry. Tang sighed faintly. According to the degree of decomposition of the bodies, these villagers were killed about 2 days ago. If they had set off immediately after returning to the Gray Coat Army, they might have been able to catch up. But at that time, they were physically and mentally exhausted, and many of them had not recovered from their injuries. Shaking his head, Tang stepped forward to pick up the young woman's body. Suddenly, Tang An's hands paused, and he looked into the woman's eyes. The young woman's face was full of pain, but there was a hint of relief in her eyes. Following her gaze, Tang looked to the right of the woodshed. There were a few planks of wood laid flat, which seemed to be used to keep things from being moist. Tang stepped over, stretched out his foot, and stomped. Thump! Tang raised his eyebrows, walked down, and reached out his hand to lift it. Bang! The planks were thrown to the side, and there was a dark staircase below. A burst of damp stench rushed up. Cellar? Tang came to a sudden realization and walked down without hesitation. Whoosh! Unexpectedly, as soon as he walked down the stairs, an arc-shaped blade was swung at his head. However, this attack was not fast, so naturally it could not hurt Tang Yin. He did not move from his spot and accurately pinched the blade with his fingers. The attack was a curved iron blade, commonly known as a scythe. Although the cellar was dark, Tang Yin could still barely see the short figure on the other side of the scythe. The short figure tried to snatch the scythe a few times, but to no avail. With a scream, she bared her white teeth and tried to bite him. TSK! Tang smacked his lips and grabbed her clothes. Old Bill. The short figure that was struggling suddenly stopped. Phew! Tang could not help but smile and breathe a sigh of relief. You must be Old Bill's granddaughter. You? Who are you? The voice was young and clear, and the short figure's eyes fluttered in the dark. How do you know my grandfather's name? Huh? Tang was ecstatic. My name is Tang Yin, and I was entrusted by Old Bill to your mother. Mother is dead. The voice on the other side lowered a little, and then asked, why didn't my grandfather come? Let's talk about this outside. Tang put the person down, and then his nose could not help but twitch. Strange, where did the stench come from in the cellar? Looking around, Tang was stunned. A black figure with a steel blade was lying at his feet. His body, head, neck were covered with long and messy scars. On his feet, there was an iron tool that was firmly stuck to it. Yes, that was a beast trap. This, TSK. Tang looked at the scythe in his hand, and then looked down at the beast trap on the ground. He could not help but smack his lips. Tap, tap, tap. Wah! Just as Tang was looking around, the short figure had already run out of the cellar, and then a heart-wrenching cry was heard. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 220. Old Bill's teenage granddaughter was called Carol. In the other world, this name meant a little bird that always sang cheerful songs. However, this cheerful bird was now constantly wailing. From her intermittent narration, Tang and the others learned that about 2 nights ago, a group of bandits suddenly came and surrounded the village. The 100,000 Mountains was a chaotic place, and there were as many bandits as there were hairs on an ox. Shea Village had been visited by these people more than once or twice, but they usually only took some food and water and left. They would not kill the goose that laid the golden eggs. But this time, when the old village chief stood up and prepared to offer food, his head was directly cut off with a knife. Then the cruel burning, killing, and looting began. Because of the urgency of time, little Carol's mother only had time to hide her in the cellar and tell her not to speak. Then, a ferocious-looking big man broke through the door and rushed in. There were gaps in the wooden planks. Little Carol, who covered her mouth tightly, watched her mother fail to commit suicide. She was constantly raped and then killed with a knife. Things did not end there. It was normal for farms to have cellars. The bandits did not seem satisfied with the harvest this time, so they began to search the cellars of every house. Naturally, they killed a lot of people who were hiding. After a bandit searched the woodshed of little Carol's house, he found the cellar under the wooden planks. But what happened next was a bit unexpected. The bandit unluckily stepped on a trap that was originally prepared for rats and some earth-penetrating animals. While he was screaming in pain, little Carol bravely rushed out of the darkness and directly slashed the bandit with her sickle. Originally, the trap only slightly injured the bandit. Even if he was hit again, he still had the strength to fight back. After all, little Carol's strength was too weak. But the bandit might have been a villain for a long time, and now he was suffering retribution. Little Carol's knife happened to cut his neck. Then, there were all kinds of mindless slashes. By the time little Carol came back to her senses, the bandit had already been deformed. Then little Carol closed the cellar door and stayed inside with the bandit's corpse for 2 days until Tang In and the others arrived. At this time, David's search was complete. Other than little Carol, there was no one alive in Shave Village. The bodies of all the villagers were gathered by the river at the east side of the village, where a pit had been dug. After persuading the crying little Carol with great difficulty, the young woman's body was also placed inside and then buried with soil. Apart from little Carol's mother, none of the other villagers had erected a stone tablet. This was something that couldn't be helped, but it was better than being exposed and eaten by various scavengers. After settling everything, Tang In walked over to the dazed Carol. "Carol, do you have any relatives?" "No, I only have my mother and grandfather." "Whoa." Little Carol lowered her head, tears still dripping from her red eyes. Tang In nodded and said, "Then you will follow Big Brother Tang In from now on, okay?" I don't know." Little Carol's mind was blank after learning that her 2 relatives had died. "Then it's settled." Tang In patted the dust off Carol's head and said straightforwardly. David also walked over and squatted down. "Sister Carol, my name is David. Your grandfather, Old Bill, once saved our lives, so you can rest assured that all of us here will take care of you. If anyone bullies you in the future, your big brother David will definitely stand up for you." Little Carol opened her empty eyes and nodded unconsciously with tears in her eyes. "Sigh." David touched Carol's soft hair and stood up with a silent sigh. After a while, Michaud and the others also returned to Shea Village. After learning that Old Bill still had relatives in this world, they were happy again. "Boss, I found out. This group of bandits is passing by. There are about 100 of them. They passed by here 2 days ago, and now they are heading south." "Very good." Tang In nodded. If they knew the direction, they would be able to catch up with them. "Then, boss, what should we do now?" "It's very simple." Tang In narrowed his eyes. "Track him, find him, and kill him." Although Tang An's words were simple, the actual operation was not easy. After all, the other party had been gone for 2 days, and no one knew if he had changed directions during this time. In the end, Tang In simply scattered the gray space, and 3 people formed a fan shape to search forward. When the gray space was established, there were 11 people. 1 was sacrificed, and 1 was seriously injured. Now, including Tang Un, David, and Michaud, there were only 12 people, so they could only be divided into 4 groups. At this time, Tang In also felt that the gray space must be expanded. Otherwise, what was the difference between this organization and not having established it? After dividing into groups, the members of the gray space quickly jumped into the continuous mountain range. Tang In walked on the mountain road with Carol and 2 other people, supporting them in the middle. Of course, the object of their search now was not the passing bandits, but the people sent by the bandits in the mountains. If one were to ask who was most familiar with the terrain and what had happened here, it would undoubtedly be them. Wherever there were barren mountains and unruly rivers, there would be bandits. This was almost a law. There is no need to say much about the terrain here in the 100,000 mountains, so bandits, and so on could be said to be local specialties here. The efficiency of the gray space members was not bad. After all, they had followed Tang In for so long, and they had learned a lot of various methods. Although they came out to make a living, they had to be righteous. But the knife was on their necks, and they were betraying others, so the bandits who were caught were very cooperative. Some of them were afraid of being silenced, and they even spoke in detail. A few hours later, the news from all over the place was summarized to Tang Yin. From the looks of it, this group of bandits had not changed direction and were still heading south. Bandits still had a strong sense of territory. When their peers passed by, they sometimes needed to greet each other to show courtesy. So it didn't take long for Tang Yin and the others to know that this group was called the Mountain Cat Bandits. The leader's name was no longer known. As for his nickname, it was Mountain Cat. He was thin, had an ordinary face, and was sinister and cunning. The most eye-catching sign was a few tufts of mustache on the side of his mouth, which was also the origin of his nickname Mountain Cat. This group of people used to be bandits and made a living in a dangerous terrain in the southeast. But for some reason, they suddenly fled here. This was probably the reason why they slaughtered Shea Village without any scruples. Anyway, it was not their territory, so they did not need to consider the problem of killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. At night, Tang Yin carried Carol, who was tired from crying, on his back and continued to move forward. At this time, it was even more difficult to obtain information. At night, there were few people and most of the bandits had gone back. Now, only by finding the other party's stronghold and catching the sentries could they possibly obtain some information. The next day, in the morning, the clouds were dark and the wind was chilly. On the rugged mountain road, a group of about 100 people were curled up and moving forward against the cold wind. From the variety of weapons in their hands, one could tell that they were not kind people. Their attire was also very mixed. Some of them wore half-body armor, while others wore thick cotton clothes. The only similarity was that they all looked listless and their steps were sluggish. Walking at the front of the group was a thin man in his prime. His face was gloomy and ordinary, and only the few tufts of mustache on the side of his mouth were rather conspicuous. It was rare for him to be wearing a neat copper armor. "Boss, how much longer do we have to walk? I'm afraid it's going to rain soon. Look, our brothers can't take it anymore." A strong man with a steel knife in his hand came over and asked. The thin man looked back and cursed, "Mother asterisk her," saying you're tired after walking for a while. "Let's see if your goddamned women will be energetic." Hee. The big man touched his head and smiled obscenely. "These two are different. TSK, TSK. Boss, when are we going to find another village to have some fun? The addiction from 2 days ago has passed. F***CK. Other than playing with women, what else can you do?" The thin man said angrily. Then his expression softened. Wait until we pass this mountain range. If we keep doing this, we'll be hunted down by our peers." Oh, the strong man heard this and immediately became listless. He sighed and said, "It's still better in the past. Guarding the road, and there will be fat sheep coming to our door." "Stop talking nonsense. Isn't this an army war? They're directly blocking the road and searching the mountain." The thin man gritted his teeth and said, "Mother asterisk her, this is an unlucky year. Of all the places to fight, they just have to fight here." After a pause, he continued, "Now we're in someone else's territory. Forcibly occupying it is taboo. Pass down the order. After we find a place to settle down, I'll definitely bring my brothers to find another village to have some fun." "Haha, okay." The strong man was overjoyed and replied, "Boom, rumble." The 100 people only felt their eyes brighten and looked up in shock. They saw that the originally gray clouds were dyed with ink and quickly turned black. Then, droplets of rain started to fall. "Mother asterisk her, it's really raining." The thin man punched his palms angrily and looked depressed. "Boss, this rain won't be light. Let's find a place to hide." The strong man wiped the rainwater off his face and said, "Easy for you to say. Where do we hide?" They were in the middle of the mountain range. It was not close to the village, and there were no inclined canyons. "Boss, there's a forest." The strong man had sharp eyes. He looked left and right and pointed at the tips of trees that popped up from the side of the mountain road. "Okay, tell the brothers to speed up." This group of bandits who were in a hurry to hide from the rain did not know that on a hill a few miles behind them, a group of about 10 people were happily pointing in their direction. "Mother asterisk her, I finally found you guys. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me." Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 2:21. Not many people liked rainy days, especially the kind that was not suitable for poetic strolling, because it meant that one would have to stay at home or go out. Fortunately, the storm in the north left as quickly as it came. When it was close to evening, the rain finally stopped a little. There were no rainbows, only new leaves, the unique fragrance of the soil after the rain, and the muddy mountain road. Damn it, how can there be any fat sheep in this weather? Let's go back. Above the canyon, a big man hiding in a simple stone building complained. Don't worry. Another older man beside him shook his clothes and climbed out of the stone house. Dedication. We need patience in this line of work. Let's wait a little longer. We'll call it a day and go back. Phew. Okay. The big man climbed out and took a deep breath of fresh air, then looked into the distance. Suddenly, his body shook. Someone is coming. Where is it? The older man's face lit up with joy. He looked in that direction and saw a black that rapidly approaching from the winding mountain road in the distance. Finally, it's here. What a pity, it's just one person. The big man rubbed his hands and said regretfully, small streams flow long. Besides, it's just one person, we'll be fine too. The older man, seemed to be more experienced. He pinched his chin and said with a smile, monopolize? That makes sense. You're really wise. Kid, you still have a lot to learn. Yeah, something's not right. This person's speed, the older man was shocked. The black dot in the distance had already passed through 2 mountain roads and was about to reach the canyon. Yo, this kid runs pretty fast. Watch me block him. The big man walked quickly to the side of the mountain and was about to push down a huge rock. The canyon road was not wide. If this huge rock fell down, the road would be blocked. The burly man was hit in the head and immediately rubbed the spot where it hurt. He looked back in confusion. Idiot, don't push it. The older man panicked and said in a low voice, we can't afford to offend this person. Whoosh. The sound of clothes fluttering in the wind came from afar. The 2 bandits looked at each other. Although the canyon was not very high, it was not very low either. Even so, the sound of clothes fluttering could still be heard from the bottom of the mountain. How fast did this person have to be? While they were in a daze, the fast figure had already jumped into the canyon. Only then did they realize that the slightly bloated figure from afar was actually a man in black carrying a little girl on his back. Whoosh, whoosh, before they could clearly see the appearance of the black-clothed man. After a series of afterimages, the figure actually left the canyon and then gradually became a small black dot. The ground. The burly man seemed to have discovered something. He pointed down and was tongue-tied. The older man also noticed that there were almost no footprints on the muddy mountain road after the rain. Rubbing their eyes, the 2 of them glanced at one another. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, no one would have thought that someone had passed by here. Let's go back. The burly man opened his mouth and suggested again. Good idea, let's go now. The older man didn't hesitate and turned to leave. In the distance, the man in black and the little girl who had just passed by. Brother Tang in, someone was watching us just now. The little girl rubbed her sleepy eyes, and her face was abnormally red. Yes, I know. Carol, you can sleep for a while. The speed did not affect the man in black's clear voice. Oh, but I can't sleep. I feel a little uncomfortable. The little girl pouted and hummed softly. Hold on for a while. We'll be there soon. Well, Brother Tang, and we'll tell you another story. The man in black paused for a while. Taking advantage of the time to catch his breath, he stomped on the ground. Before the mud splashed up, he had already left the place. Okay, once upon a time, there was a shepherd boy who went to the mountain to herd sheep every day. But his memory was not very good. In order to be afraid that there would be too few sheep, he would go and count every once in a while. 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep. Oh, he forgot again, so he went and counted again. 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep. The man in black turned his head. The little girl had already fallen asleep on his back, her nose twitching weakly. Phew! The man in black breathed a sigh of relief, then frowned and shook his head slightly. These two people were naturally Tang In and Little Carol. Although their revenge was successful in the morning, Little Carol had a very high fever, perhaps because of the heavy rain or the stimulation of her spirit. This was the wilderness, and there was no place to treat her. Tang indecisively decided that he would take Little Carol back to the station first, and David and the others would rush back later. With Tang in speed, there was no need to talk about it. Now that he was in his full state and his skills were constantly buffering and stacking, ordinary people who saw him would be no different from seeing a ghost in broad daylight. Tang didn't know how many waves of bandits he had encountered just now. Some of them had bright eyes and didn't dare to make a move. Tang didn't bother with those who made a move. He just flashed past them, leaving them waving their sabers as they rushed down the mountain. Of course, such speed required physical support. After running for half a day, Tang was also panting like a cow, and his legs were sore. However, Little Carol's condition couldn't be delayed at all. He could only grit his teeth and hold on. Go, 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 speed up, speed up, speed up. When he said that they were almost there, he wasn't coaxing Little Carol. At this speed, in less than half an hour, Tang saw the collapse mine. Seeing the mine meant that they were almost at the valley. Tang didn't stop at all and flashed past. He directly went over a few small hills, and the flat valley was already in sight. Tang suddenly exclaimed, and then his footsteps paused. His body swayed a few times, and he came to an emergency stop. It turned out that from afar, Tang saw a long line of people slowly walking in from the edge of the valley. Tang wasn't in the mood to think about who these people were. What was their purpose? He just stared straight at the other party's horse. It was like a thirsty man encountering a deep well. His current speed was, of course, faster than a horse, but he couldn't guarantee that he could last all the way to the camp. If he had a horse, it would undoubtedly be much better. Thinking of this, Tang no longer hesitated and quickly ran down the hill toward the team. The distance between the two sides wasn't far, and the other party's speed had been slow. Tang naturally approached them quickly. However, although this team was slow, they did a good job of guarding. As soon as Tang appeared at the back, the other party discovered him, and a team was immediately transferred over. This was just a simple precaution. After all, the valley was so big, the other party might not be coming toward them. But after a moment, these people frowned, because Tang's goal was very clear, and that was to rush straight toward them. As he got closer, Tang also found that these people didn't seem to be simple. Not to mention other things, just the golden fish scale armor on their bodies was much stronger than the average soldier. Who are you? Stop quickly. Stop? You must be kidding. Tang turned a deaf ear and still rushed toward them. Release. Whoosh. Tang who was running quickly, suddenly moved sideways by a foot and instantly avoided the whistling arrow. Then, he didn't stop at all and continued to rush forward. This arrow was originally just a warning, but after seeing Tang's actions, they immediately became nervous. A small team of guards left the team and quickly came to stop him. Who are you if you don't stop attack? Before the warning could be finished, Tang was already in front of them. The team leader immediately made a decision and immediately ordered the attack. Hiss, 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 the sound of the saber cutting through the air was instantly heard. But after the slash, these guards were stunned because the person in front of them had disappeared. Damn it, behind! The small group of guards turned around and saw that the intruder, who was originally in front of them, could only see his back as he ran towards the convoy. How could it be, when did he go over, the people in the convoy were also stunned? They originally thought that even if the small team couldn't finish him off, they could at least stop him for a moment. But in a blink of an eye, the intruder actually broke through just like that. Enemy attack, be alert. A big man with a full beard in the team shouted loudly. The convoy stopped instantly, and then the guards moved closer. Attack. Whoosh! This time, there were even more guards. A large group of them rushed over with shining sabers in their hands. Under the charge, the two sides instantly closed in. Whoosh! Where is he? Damn it, he came in. Damn it, don't slash randomly. Spread out, spread out. The small team of guards who had been easily shaken off finally knew how the intruder got rid of them. His figure was like a fish in water, quickly and nimbly shuttling in and out of the crowd. As long as there was a slight gap, he would immediately insert himself. If the front was blocked tightly, he would reach out and push lightly, or use his feet to trip. All kinds of small movements were done easily. The guards who were gathered together were already confused and disoriented. Under such a small trick, they immediately fell into a complete mess, and their formation was instantly disrupted. In just a moment, Tang In left the group of battered and exhausted soldiers and continued to approach the convoy. "A bunch of trash, get out of my way." The big man with a full beard pushed the soldiers in front of him away and raised his sword high to slash down. "Stop!" Chi, as the big sword fell, the body of the sword suddenly shone brightly, and then a blue fighting aura came out of the sword and slashed at Tang In the shape of a half-moon. This big man was obviously a veteran of fighting, and he only released the fighting aura a moment before the attack, intending to catch Ling Xian off guard. Boom! Chunks of soil flew, and a hole immediately appeared in the ground. Was he dead? Of course not. The big man with a full beard only felt a shadow in front of him, and suddenly looked up, immediately widening his eyes. He saw Ling Xian's body lightly leap into the air, and then the tip of his foot lightly tapped the back of the big sword, and then jumped up again over his head. The big man with a full beard stood like a wooden stake, and his mind was a little confused for a moment. He was passed by just like that. Tang In didn't care about the other party's feelings, and after passing the big man, he had already rushed into the convoy. His figure accelerated again and rushed to the front of a carriage, and the blade in his hand swung down. Hiss! The reins were broken, and Tang In nimbly flipped onto the handsome horse, and then without hesitation stabbed the horses but with the dagger. Hiss! The war horse felt pain, and immediately raised its head and neighed. Then it flipped its 4 hooves and rushed forward. Ta-ta-ta! The horse's momentum was very fierce, and the oncoming soldiers were caught off guard and subconsciously jumped to the side. "Everyone, sorry to disturb you. Let me borrow your horse, and if we meet in the future, I will definitely return it." Ta! The sound gradually faded away with the horse's hooves. "Borrow the horse." The guards looked at each other, and their hearts were filled with shame and anger. And that was a F***king robbery. Okay. Hey, what's going on? What's going on? The door of the carriage opened, and a rather charming young man hurriedly controlled the frightened horse. "Hey, why is there one less who stole my horse?" The young man stood up with a face full of anger, and his rather uncoordinated long robe was messy in the wind, and his white legs full of leg hair were also exposed. "Ah, it's so cold. Philip, quickly close the door." "Annoying. If you don't close it, I will be seen naked." After a wave of condemnation, flower shoes, underwear, and so on were thrown out one after another. Bang! The door closed, and Philip jumped out of the carriage in a sorry state. Cough, cough. The big man with a full beard walked over, and ignoring the lipstick marks on the other party's face, he bowed and said, "Lord Philip, just now, someone broke into the convoy and stole your horse." "Oh, then where is he? Daring to steal my horse. You have good taste? I'll just teach you a little lesson." The other party came too hastily. Sorry, he ran away. The big man with a full beard lowered his head. Ugh! Philip opened his mouth, blinked a few times, and then turned to look at the messy guards over there. A moment later, a hysterical and exaggerated roar was heard. What kind of joke is this? You're the royal guards, the royal guards. You actually let a thief, oh no, a bandit steal your horse right under your nose. God, tell me this is just a joke, even though this is not funny at all. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 222. It's not a big problem, just a cold. You'll recover after a few days of rest. Phew, that's good. Thank you, doctor. Haha, you're welcome. In the white tent, Tang In bowed and sent off an old man with a white beard before letting out a long sigh of relief. His legs went soft, and his body swayed a few times before he hurriedly supported himself on a chair and sat down. With the help of the horse, Tang In finally rushed back to the Gray Coat Army's encampment in the evening. There, he happened to meet Josiah and Fry. Under Josiah's lead, the few of them quickly rushed to the Gray Coat Army's treatment area and found the doctor. Tang, what's wrong? Josiah walked over anxiously. You don't look well. Do you need a doctor to take a look? Tang In waved his hand. It's nothing. I'll be fine after some rest. He had been running wildly in the rain for half a day. How could his complexion be good? Brother Tang In, didn't you go to Old Bill's house? Why did you bring back a child? Where's David and the rest? Fry didn't say much as the situation was urgent. Now, he finally asked in bewilderment. Tis, Tang, and he shook his head and sighed. We were too late. Old Bill's village was destroyed by a group of bandits. What? Fry was shocked, and his expression changed. Then his daughter-in-law and granddaughter. Fry was a person who valued friendship and loyalty. Otherwise, he wouldn't have disregarded everything and chopped off the heads of nobles for the sake of his subordinates. Old Bill could be said to have saved his life. If not for his sensitive identity, he would have followed Tang In over at that time. She's Old Bill's granddaughter. Tang In pointed at the unconscious Carol and didn't say anything else. Fry naturally understood what he omitted. He clenched his fists and his eyes spat fire. Damn it, where are those bandits? Don't worry. Tang In pursed his lips and narrowed his eyes. I gotta let them go. I've already killed them all. Good job. Brother Tang In, thank you. Fry pounded his palm and said resentfully, They're lucky. If they fall into my hands, humph. What's there to thank me for? It's what I should do. Then, Tang In looked at little Carol with a strange expression. He thought to himself, it wasn't cheap. That bandit group's boss died. TSK. Fred nodded when he heard that. That's true. We'll be comrades in the future. There's no need to be so polite. Tang In's heart skipped a beat. Then he looked at Fry with joy. That's right. A few of my brothers and I have decided to join the Gray Coat Army. Fred shrugged. Actually, other than this, we don't know what else to do. Ha good. Tang In stood up and patted Frey's shoulder. Don't say that. At least you can realize your dream. Dream? Fry stared blankly. Then he thought of what he said before. The best ending in this life was to stand side by side with his brothers and finally die on the battlefield. Of course, this was a joke. Tang In was happy that Fry chose to join the Gray Coat Army. Who was this? This was the captain of the Lightning Spear Formation breaking team that was the first to break into the enemy's territory. As long as he was here, the Lightning Spear Formation breaking team would be restored to its former glory. By the way, Josiah, I want to ask you for a favor. Ask me for a favor? Go ahead. Joshua was stunned for a moment before he opened his mouth. Tang In turned to look at little Carol and said, I want you to take care of little Carol. Yes, we owe Old Bill a favor. This should be done by us. But we're all men, so that's it. No problem. Josiah agreed readily. He walked to the bedside and said, Carol will be my sister from now on. I will take good care of her. Brother Twain, you're so thoughtful. Fry sighed. Then, he said firmly, I also told a few of my brothers that we will be Carol's uncles from now on. If anyone dares to bully her, they will have to ask the permission of the gun in my hand first. After making this decision, Fry was still affected by the previous news. He was not in a good mood. After a while, he said goodbye. In order not to disturb little Carol's rest, Tang In and the others also walked out of the tent. Looking at Frey's back, Josiah said, Brother Fry is very impressive. Aunt Loosa also said that she wanted to thank you for bringing back such a talent. Did you know that Aunt Loosa wanted him to lead a regiment first? But Brother Fry said that he would not be rewarded if he did not do anything. He insisted on starting as a soldier. In the end, she finally persuaded him to be a captain. Oh, Tang In nodded. Fry's indeed such a person. Tang In was a little disapproving of Frey's decision. If he started as a soldier, wouldn't it be a waste of his military talent? But Frey's resolute character could not be forced. Fortunately, he had the ability. He would probably be promoted soon. Okay, Josiah nodded. Then, he turned his head and said, Tang Yin, can I ask you a question? Don't be so polite. Just ask. Oh, Aunt Luosa said yesterday that she would bring me to participate in the negotiation, but I have no idea what to do. Josiah spread his hands. His eyes were full of confusion. Bring Josiah to participate in the negotiation. Tang Yin's heart skipped a beat. So, Luosa had decided to make Josiah the hero of the Gray Coat Army. In this negotiation, there was no doubt that the Gray Coat Army had the upper hand. In the end, it was just a matter of how much they gained. So, as long as he participated in the negotiation, he would be a hero of the Gray Coat Army. In the future, it would also be a solid capital to rise in rank. Well, Tang Yin thought quickly and said, this is just like buying something. Now, we are the merchants. We have the only bargaining chip in our hands. So, first of all, we must have a domineering attitude. Well, it means that we have to flip the table from time to time. Flip the table. Josiah opened his mouth slightly and hesitated. Isn't that a little impolite? It's just an example. Then, let's change it to slamming the table. Well, make a domineering expression for me to see. Domineering. Josiah tilted his head and thought for a while. Then his cheeks puffed up. He stared fiercely in front of him. Is it like this? You're here to force me to pay my debt. Tang Yin rubbed his forehead. Forget it. You just have to sit there quietly, keep a straight face, and look at the other party from time to time. Well, you have to say in your heart, you are a toad, you are a toad. Next, we have to double the conditions that we originally proposed, and add a few conditions that the other party will not agree to. Well, this negotiation will not end so quickly, so we have to keep bargaining. Believe me, we will get more if we do this. Remember. Josiah nodded like a good student. I will go back and think about the specifics. Tang Yin pinched the bridge of his nose and said, I will teach you some facial expression control in these 2 days. I am good at acting. This was the truth. Acting was a compulsory course for assassins. Okay, thank you, Tang. Josiah cheered. Tang Yin waved his hand nonchalantly. It's just a small matter. Well, then I will not disturb you. Josiah suddenly turned his head to look to the right. What's wrong? Oh, nothing. Maybe it was my imagination. I seem to have felt magical waves just now. Josiah said uncertainly. Magical waves? Tang Yin shrugged. You are the only mage in the Gray Coat Army. Oh yes, I must have felt it wrong. Well, Tang, then I will not disturb your rest. Goodbye. It was already evening. After saying goodbye to Josiah, Tang Yin walked to his resting place. However, just as he reached the first fork in the road, Tang Yin suddenly felt something. He glanced over calmly, raised his eyebrows, and strode forward. A moment later, a handsome young man dressed in neat clothes walked out from the shadows of the tunnel. Perhaps it was because of the weather, but his face was a little dark. At this moment, Josiah was mumbling as he walked over slowly. Domineering. Yes, domineering. The young man rubbed his face, and the shadows disappeared. He stepped forward, turned around, and smiled like a spring breeze. Hi, Josiah, good evening. You are Toad. His smile froze instantly. This expression, well, it was hard to describe, but it was very loving. Gee. No, I am sorry. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 223. The most hardworking thing in the world was like the sun. After resting for half a day yesterday, it slowly climbed up from the east today. The members of the Gray Space did not have the speed of Tang Yin, so they did not rush back to the camp until dawn. As a result, there was no need to carry out the morning training every day. However, Tang Yin still could not sleep in, because early in the morning, he was dragged out of the tent by Josiah. Then, the people who woke up early would find the popular Miss Josiah and an ordinary-looking young man staring at each other in the corner of the camp. Both of their faces twitched from time to time, and they looked quite conflicted. What is Miss Josiah doing? Are they angry and quarreling? A peasant woman who was holding washed rice and preparing to cook asked in confusion. Very similar. Damn it, who is that person? What kind of heinous thing did he do? I have never seen Miss Josiah, so, angry. The burly young man on the other side was full of anger. That can't be right. They didn't say anything. It's over, it's over. Miss Josiah is so angry that she can't even speak. Damn it, he still dares to hit her. The burly young man's eyes were full of fire. He rolled up his sleeves and was ready to teach the abominable guy who dared to provoke his goddess. On the other side, Tang Yin reached out and rubbed Josiah's face. He said bitterly, "You are so stupid. Oppress, do you understand? I didn't ask you to be in a daze. And why do you keep blinking? It's shameful to act cute. I can't help it. When I look at you, I want to close my eyes." Josiah's face was first red, and then she said with grievance, Are you saying that I'm too horrible to look at? I'm just doing out of habit. Josiah was able to become a magician, so she was naturally not stupid. After all, the complex and mysterious magic circle and the obscure spells were difficult to remember. If she was not smart, she would not be able to do it. However, a person's cleverness always depended on other aspects. Josiah, who was naturally naive, couldn't handle this rich and even slightly exaggerated acting. Tang had been teaching for more than half an hour, but the effect was minimal. Done, you're an assassin. Of course you know about oppression and killing intent. I'm not one, so of course I can't feel it. Assassin? The body of the young man who was walking over and preparing to act courageously for a just cause trembled, and then his footsteps slowed down. So that's how it is. Here, the person standing in front of you is the murderer of your father that you've caught. Now, prepare to punish him. Come on, glare at me with hatred. Well, my father is still alive, Josiah said weakly. Tang Yin touched his forehead and sighed. Imagine. I'll let you imagine for a while. Oh. Josiah pursed his lips and looked at Tang Yin angrily. However, after a moment, his expression relaxed. I have a feeling. Well done, describe it more vividly. You must have extorted a confession before. I'll refer to it and try again. Well, let me think. It's too much this time and a half. Tang Yin knocked on his head and whispered, Too much. The young man who had already walked to the two shuddered, and his outstretched hand froze in the air. Well, I've got it. Tang Yin snapped his fingers and gestured. First, I'll cover his eyes with a cloth. You know, the unknown is the most frightening thing. Then I'll slowly cut his body with a dagger. Then I'll cut his sixth rib from the left. There's a little common sense that you should know. A person's vitality is actually very strong, so it's okay to remove some of his liver, lungs, and kidneys. At this time, I'll untie the cloth, open his eyes, and let him explore the mystery of the human body structure with you. Oh, how wonderful. What's with your expression? It's not like I'm cutting you. What are you afraid of? Josiah's face was pale, and his lips trembled. Tang, this is too cruel. The murderer of my father, of course. I have to be ruthless. You are? What's the matter? Tang Yin looked at the young man standing next to him and asked in surprise. I. The young man's expression changed. He withdrew his hand inch by inch and waved stiffly. No, nothing. I'll go first. Wan. Good night, Tang Yin turned his head and looked at the rising sun in the east. He blinked inexplicably and was a little confused for a moment. On the other side, the young man had already walked back with mechanical dance steps. Tang Yin shrugged and said, How is it? Did you get the feeling? Josiah nodded reluctantly. I'll try. Tang, what you said just now, you didn't really do it, right? This? Of course not. I just imagined it. Ha! Tang Yin touched his nose and smiled innocently. Under this strange teaching method, Josiah's control of his expression and emotions finally improved. Of course, it was not easy to achieve this result because it took the two of them nearly a day. Well, that's it for today. Go back and think about it. Tang Yin waved his hand and announced that today's practice was over. Josiah was relieved and kept patting his cheeks with his hands. He was almost cramping. Well, okay. By the way, little Carol has moved to my place. Her condition is much better. Well, maybe we don't know each other. She doesn't like to talk much. Tang Yin shook his head and sighed. It wasn't like this at first. Sigh. This incident hit her too hard. Oh, I know. Leave it to me. Joshua patted his chest confidently. Don't worry. I'll make sure she's as good as new. I hope so. Then, Teacher Tang, see you tomorrow. Josiah stuck out his tongue with a mischievous face, stroked the robe at his waist, and bowed slightly. Tangan was startled and then curled his lips. You like to play tricks. Although Josiah was very determined in his promise. She soon failed. It was late at night, close to dawn. Tang In, who was sleeping, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were clear, without the slightest confusion of just waking up. He turned his head and saw a short black shadow at the entrance of the tent, trying hard to pull off the curtain buckle from the outside. The buckle was just a simple noose. If one shook it up and down skillfully, it could be opened from the outside. The little black shadow seemed to be afraid of waking up the person inside, so it was very careful. Tangan raised his eyebrows and silently rolled out of bed. He walked to the curtain and opened it. The other person quickly covered his mouth with his hand, so the exclamation was very short. Carol? Tangan lowered his head and opened his mouth in shock. Big brother Tang In, standing outside the curtains, was Carol in her underwear. Her soft hair was disheveled, and her small body shivered from time to time in the cold wind. Her face was still filled with fear. Why are you here? Where's Josiah? You're wearing so little. Where are your shoes? Tangan picked Carol up, his heart aching. He found that her little feet had already turned black and gray and were covered with mud. Wearing shoes will wake up big sister Josiah. Oh, I sneaked here. Carol narrowed her eyes in Tangan's arms, seeming to enjoy it very much. Sneaked here. Tangan's face was full of shock, but he couldn't care less. He carried little Carol to the bed and wrapped her in 3 layers of blankets. Then he walked to the side and boiled some water. Carol didn't resist and twisted a few times like a bear. Her dirty little feet dangled outside, seeming to be very happy. Carol, put your feet in. Oh, but it's very dirty. Carol put her calves together and curled up a little. Now you know it's dirty. Tang In added some firewood, clapped his hands, and stood up. His face was slightly gloomy. Now, tell me the reason. You're sick. How can you run out so casually? I don't like it there. Carol pursed her lips. You don't like it? Tang In frowned. You don't like big sister Josiah? Oh no. Carol shook her head, and her scattered hair floated in the air. Big sister Josiah is very good, but I can't sleep there. Tang In's expression eased a little. He walked to the bed and combed Carol's hair. Will you have nightmares? This was conceivable. After all, little Carol had suffered a lot of trauma before. Ordinary adults might not be able to accept it, let alone a teenage girl. Well, yes. Carol raised her head like a kitten that had been combed. TSK, then what should we do? It's okay. As long as Big Brother Tang In is by my side, I won't have nightmares. Big Brother Tang In is very powerful. He can protect me. After saying that, Carol kept nodding. Her tone was very certain. Tang In was dumbfounded. It can't be. What's going on? The water is boiling. Tang In took out a basin, poured some cold water, and then mixed it with hot water. He pressed Carol's feet in it and washed them. During this time, Tang In also sorted out his messy thoughts. Carol, how about this? You stay with Big Brother Tang In for a few days. When you don't have nightmares anymore, you can go back to Big Sister Josiah. How about it? Okay, but what if I have nightmares again after I leave Big Brother Tang In? Carol's feet seemed to be a little hot. They were very restless. Little Carol's words were not impossible. Tang In helplessly pinched the bridge of his nose. This was a headache. What should he do? Big Brother Tang In, why don't I learn some powerful skills from you? If I learn well, I won't be afraid. I heard from Big Sister Josiah that Big Brother David and the others were all taught by you. Then, can I join your Ash whatever space? Nonsense. No. Tang In's face instantly darkened. He then shook his head and patiently persuaded, Big Brother Tang In, this organization kills people. You can't touch it. You just have to be happy. Josiah, Big Brother David, and Uncle Fry will protect you. Carol blinked. She was not frightened. Instead, she said, "Big brother Tang In, do you kill bad people?" "Carol, you want the same." "No. No matter what you say." "Okay, big brother Tang In." "No." "Okay." The two argued until there was no conclusion. Tang In, who had a headache, simply picked up Carol, laid her on the pillow, and ordered her to sleep first. Phew! After doing all this, Tang In found a chair and sat down. He let out a long sigh of relief. "Big brother Tang In, I can do it." A muffled voice came from under the blanket. "Don't even think about it. Go to sleep." "Oh, if you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 224. The next morning, the sky was slightly bright. Little Carol still looked like she was sleeping soundly, so Tangin didn't wake her up. After going out, he first went to Josiah, who hadn't fully woken up yet. But after hearing Tangin's words, Josiah quivered and was completely shocked awake. Only then did he realize that little Carol was gone. The bedding on the bed was still in the shape of an arched bridge, as if someone was sleeping inside. Needless to say, Josiah looked shocked, embarrassed, and ashamed. In fact, mages were not that sensitive to the movements around them because they weren't good at close combat. But it was mainly because Josiah didn't expect little Carol to do this. Otherwise, he would have set up a small alert spell at the door, and he would have discovered Carol's little trick immediately. After comforting Josiah, who was blaming himself, Tangin turned and walked to the entrance of the encampment. When he got there, except for those who were seriously injured, all the members of the gray space were there. "Pack a full bag of sand." "Yes." David and the others nodded, then untied their backpacks and began to pour in the soil from the mound. Stones were naturally more effective when carrying heavy loads, but they didn't have any here, so they had to use soil instead. About a few minutes later, everyone carried their full backpacks on their shoulders. Tangin didn't check and waved for everyone to start their morning run. When the gray space was first established, there were still some people who wanted to be sneaky. But after the previous pursuit and seeing the improvement of their own strength, they were now following Tang On's instructions to the letter. "A boss." At this moment, David suddenly opened his mouth and pointed behind Tang In with a shocked expression. Tangin turned his head in surprise, his eyes widening in an instant and his head full of black lines. 100 meters behind him, a small figure carrying a scythe taller than her ran over quickly. Seeing Tangin turn his head, she raised the scythe with both hands and waved it in his direction. This was little Carol, who had been sleeping soundly when Tang In went out just now. Huff, huff, huff. Little Carol ran to the petrified people with a red face and gasped, "Good morning, Brother Tang In, Brother David, Brother Michaud. Good morning." Good morning." David scratched his head with a strange expression. The corner of Tang Un's eyes twitched a few times. He reached out and grabbed little Carol's scythe. He looked it up and down. It had a wooden hilt and a black iron body. It was quite heavy in his hand. He rubbed the edge of the blade. It was bright and shiny. Obviously, it had just been sharpened. He roared, "Damn it! Who made this scythe for you?" Little Carol shrank her head and whispered, "Brother Tang In, I asked Grandpa Blacksmith to call me last night." It turned out that after Carol slipped out of Josiah's place last night, she didn't just run to Tangin's place. Before that, she had asked the patrolling guards and found out about the Gray Coat Army smithy. After knocking on the other party's door, she asked for a scythe in the name of Tangin. Although the blacksmith was puzzled, he didn't dare to neglect it. Who was Tangin? He was the captain of the Gray Space. Although the recent news about the Gray Space was mixed, one thing was certain. The Gray Space was not to be trifled with, and Captain Tang In was even more so. Besides, the other party only asked for a scythe, so the old blacksmith readily agreed and asked Carol to pick it up tomorrow morning. Phew! Tang In exhaled a long breath of fresh air and looked down at little Carol's expectant eyes. "You really put in a lot of effort." Judging from the current situation, little Carol's request to learn from Tang In last night was premeditated. She said it before just to give him a heads up. Moreover, she also expected that Tang In wouldn't agree, so she directly acted first and reported later. For such a small brain to come up with such a plan, what else could it be other than putting in a lot of effort? Okay. Tang Yin nodded expressionlessly and said coldly, "Since you want to learn so much, I'll agree. But I'll say this first. The training in the gray space is very tough. If you can't withstand it, don't ask me for this again in the future." Little Carol's face lit up with joy at first. Then she replied firmly, "Okay, I got it. Thank you, Brother Tang Yin." Tang Yin didn't say anything. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Yes. David and the others straightened their bodies and immediately started running outside. Little Carol carried the scythe and quickly followed behind. Since it was Tang Yin's request, the blacksmith naturally made the scythe according to adult standards. Now, that little Carol picked it up. She could only carry it on her shoulder. Of course, there were people standing guard outside the Gray Coat Army's encampment. When the Gray Space ran here, they realized that it was Frey's team. Fry originally wanted to go forward and say hello, but when he saw little Carol following behind, his eyeballs almost fell to the ground. Then he stood there in a daze with his hands raised, staring blankly at Tang Yin and the others running over. The empty eastern valley was covered in a thin fog. From afar, it looked like a halo surrounding the surroundings, but when you ran over, you would find that the fog ring was still in front of you. The road after the rain was naturally not easy to walk on. There were many muddy puddles. However, the members of the Gray Space acted as if they didn't see it and still walked straight through. Damn it. Did you all turn into turtles after sleeping? Run for me. Run. Yes. After David and the others finished shouting, they looked behind hesitantly, then looked at the frosty Tang Yin and couldn't help but speed up. They had just started running, so of course, they wouldn't run out of stamina. The reason why David and the others were doing this was to wait for little Carol behind them. Although Carol's 2 legs were running fast, she was short after all, and her steps were small. She had to run 4 or 5 steps to match 1 step of David and the others. As a result, she was naturally left behind. Now that David and the others had sped up, little Carol couldn't keep up. After a while, the figures of the entire Gray Space disappeared into the thin fog. Little Carol didn't care. She just lowered her head and ran while biting her lip, her large scythe swinging back and forth on her shoulder. The Gray Space's morning exercise distance was 7 kilometers. It wasn't that they didn't want to run more, but after running here, the Army's encampment was in front of them. The Army soldiers were already used to this training method. The first time they saw it, these soldiers were as if they were facing a great enemy, but they knew that the other party was an arrow's distance away and automatically returned. Later, when they ran again, the Army soldiers watched with the mentality of watching a show. No one thought that this was useful. Running? Was it to run faster when escaping? Ha! 10 minutes later, the Gray Space's team arrived at the Army's encampment. As the soldiers pointed at them, they returned. At this time, they didn't slow down. It was only a few kilometers. Compared to the dozens of kilometers they ran before, it really paled in comparison. However, 10 minutes later, they gradually slowed down and looked at each other. Where was she? Little Carol was running behind them. No matter how slow she was, they should have seen her by now. Now that they couldn't see her, there were only 2 explanations. One was that little Carol went back, and the other was that little Carol ran astray. Judging from little Carol's stubborn personality, the second possibility was undoubtedly the most likely. Boss! David leaned close to Tang Yin, wanting to say something, but hesitating. Shut up, Tang Yin said with a dark expression. Then he paused. Lead everyone back to the camp. Yes. Although he was reprimanded, David still happily agreed. After everyone left, Tang Yin's figure quickly spread out, sweeping around the surroundings. After observing the traces on the ground, he headed south. Little Carol had indeed run astray. She had her head down, and it was her first time running, so it was normal for her to run astray. At this time, her scythe had shifted from her right shoulder to her left shoulder. After running for a while, it shifted to her right shoulder, and then to her left shoulder. Huff, 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 plop. Finally, during one of the shifts, little Carol's figure tilted and she fell to the ground. The curved scythe rolled a few times and fell in front of her. This happened to be a depression, so the dirty water immediately splashed all over her. Pay. Carol kept wiping her mouth with her hand. Then, she looked up. There was still a misty halo around her. There was no one at all. The feeling of being the only one left in the world naturally wasn't pleasant. Big Brother Tang in. The crisp voice didn't travel far before disappearing. Little Carol bit her lower lip and climbed up from the depression. She took a few steps forward and picked up the scythe that had suddenly become very heavy. She gestured twice, but still couldn't carry it on her shoulder. In the end, she simply dragged it behind her and jogged. Chee. The scythe slid across the water, the grass, and the muddy ground, leaving a straight trail. Occasionally, it would bump into some small stones, which would make a monotonous tinkling sound. The north and south sides of the station were steep and unclimbable mountains. After running for more than half an hour, the exhausted little Carol couldn't help but be stunned when she saw the mountain behind the fog. Then, she turned her head and looked behind her. At this time, she knew she had run astray and was now lost. Even adults would panic after getting lost, let alone a 10-year-old child. Little Carol looked around blankly. At this time, she had two choices. One was to turn her head and look for traces of where she came from. This way, she might be able to go back. The second was to continue running, but she didn't know where her destination was. After hesitating for a while, little Carol still went east along the mountain peak. At this time, she didn't have the strength to run anymore. She could only drag the scythe and stagger forward. There was no purpose, no direction, and no one else. In the empty, misty valley, there was only a small figure walking alone. The only thing accompanying her was the scythe. Loneliness was scary, but what was even scarier was the fear that came with it. Any sound would make little Carol stop and look around. At this time, in her eyes, the surrounding mist turned into tigers, hungry wolves, and so on. I'm lost. This place is so big. Big Brother Tang, and definitely can't find me. I'm going to be eaten by wolves, taken away by bad people, starved to death. Woo-woo. The sound of crying finally sounded. In the end, she was just a child. In this situation, what else could she do other than cry? But despite her fear, little Carol still stubbornly walked forward while wiping her tears. Woo-woo, I'm not afraid of you. Woo-woo, come on, big bad wolf. I have a scythe. I'm not afraid of you. Woo-woo, please don't come. I'm not tasty. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 225. Behind every multiple choice, there was an inevitable result. Civilians did not have many choices. Being born meant that they were at the bottom of society and had to do some heavy labor. They basically had no access to fighting energy, magic, or other things that could improve their strength. Therefore, they might face an ordinary life. They might also face oppression and exploitation and silently endure it. Or they might face situations where they or their family members were bullied and they were powerless to fight back. But what if they had a certain amount of power? Could they avoid the above bad situations? That might not be the case. The more powerful you are, the more trouble you will cause. That is for sure. After all, with power, one would have ambition and rely on this kind of direct and violent method to solve problems. The consequences of this method were often more intense. Unless you were number one in the world, you would face constant fighting and disputes. If there was peace and stability, who would be willing to struggle for survival? Of these two choices, Tang In had no choice but to walk the path of the latter, but he did not want little Carol to do the same. Whether it was out of his own will or because of Old Bill's dying wish. Tang In did not want little Carol to be like him, with her hands covered in blood and countless wailing souls on her weapon. And then one day in the future, she would also become a soul on someone else's weapon. But looking at the young figure in front of him who was constantly staggering forward, Tang In vaguely felt that his thoughts might fall through. He had followed behind Carol for a long time, watching her fall, watching her blankness, watching her fear, watching her cry. In the end, he prayed that little Carol would give up, but in the end, this stubborn little girl still chose to move forward regardless. Huff! Tang took a deep breath of the fog. The cold feeling instantly cleared his mind, and then he slowly exhaled. Ahead was the army's checkpoint. Little Carol took a big detour and finally arrived here. The fog was slightly thinner, and the soldiers on the other side also discovered this little girl who was dragging a scythe and seemed a little confused. A few soldiers approached. Of course, they did not want to do anything, but since they were here, they had to get to the bottom of this. Seeing them approach, little Carol hurriedly turned and retreated. In the hearts of children, there was not much difference between strangers and bad people. As soon as she turned around, little Carl's panicked expression disappeared and was replaced with joy. Big Brother Tang In. The corners of Tang Un's mouth twitched as he forced a smile. Then, he picked up little Carol who had rushed over. Wow, I was so scared. I thought I would never see Brother Tang In again. Boo-hoo. Don't be afraid. Big Brother Tang In will always be by your side. Tang In stroked little Carol's soft hair, waved at the approaching soldiers, and instantly retreated into the fog. On the way back, little Carol gradually calmed down after her excitement. Then, she secretly glanced at the thoughtful Tang In from the corner of her eye. Big Brother Tang In. Little Carol whispered timidly. If you don't like Carol like this, then I won't do it in the future. Tang In lowered his head and looked at little Carol, who was holding the sickle with her right hand and pinching her clothes with her left hand. She looked a little dejected. He chuckled and said, Can you tell Big Brother Tang In why you want to learn this? Little Carol stuttered, then finally looked up and said, I want to kill all the bad people. Tang In was startled when he heard this. He couldn't help but touch his nose. A sense of absurdity filled his heart. What a great, boring dream. Assassins didn't seem to be good people either. Ahem, the bad people you're talking about are those bandits and robbers? Little Carol nodded and said firmly, it's them. Phew, that's good. Tang In wiped his forehead and immediately thought of the reason why little Carol did this. It was probably because the scene of her village being destroyed and her mother being killed in front of her eyes was too stimulating. However, although this goal was small, but it wasn't that small, bandits and robbers were everywhere in the north. There were too many to count and too many to kill. Even the brand officials didn't eliminate them, let alone this little girl who was struggling to drag the sickle. Okay. Tang In finally agreed. I'll allow you to train with the Gray Space Team in the future. Really? Yeah. Little Carol ran 2 steps forward, waving her sickle and jumping up and down happily. Whoosh, Tang In was stunned. He subconsciously raised his hand and caught the scythe flying toward him. The curved blade was only a few inches away from his eyes. Cold sweat instantly dripped down his forehead. Although the profession of an assassin required him to be constantly vigilant of the approaching danger, this kind of danger, who could he reason with? Big Brother Tang In, be careful. Little Carol's face was full of horror. Her warning came too late. Phew! Tang In waved his hand and said solemnly, Carol, although I promised you, there are conditions. Before I acknowledge your strength, you're not allowed to fight with others. Do you understand? Oh, Carol understands. After this interlude, the two continued to walk to the base. But at this time, little Carol was much more lively. She jumped up and down, and from time to time, she would see small flowers in the wild and pick them for Tang In as if they were treasures. Tang In smiled and put the flowers on little Carol's head. Hee. Carol, can Big Brother ask you a question? Sure. Why do you use a sickle as a weapon? No reason. What do I use if not a sickle? Okay. Aren't you quite cheerful now? Why do you like to talk in front of others? Because I like Big Brother Tang In. After about 10 minutes, the two returned to the base. At this time, the smoke had completely dispersed, and Dongfang Shiri's face was completely revealed. Tang In introduced little Carol to Fry and the others and let her recognize these uncles. Tang In also told Fry about little Carol's decision. The latter also disagreed. He had been on the battlefield all his life and knew the value of a stable life. But after listening to Tang Un's story, he finally nodded helplessly. After all, even if they didn't want to teach her, according to little Carol's stubborn personality, she would find someone else. In that case, it would be better to let Tang Un take care of her. At this time, it was just time for breakfast. While eating breakfast, Tang Un gave today's training program to the gray space. He asked David and Micho to each lead a group of people to track and kill in the wild. After breakfast, Tang Un sent little Carol back to her tent and told her not to go anywhere. After all, she had just recovered from a cold. As for little Carol's training program, Tang Un needed to think about it carefully. Whether it was for protection or selfishness, Tang Un decided to find time to ask the omnipotent old butler about how to attack with a sickle. If an unorthodox weapon was used well, it could often catch people off guard, so Tang Un didn't plan to teach little Carol the dagger attack he was best at. Yes, and he had the Tide mantra. Of course, it was already a high-level mantra. As long as she practiced it well, she could definitely become a high-level warrior. But Tang Un still wanted to find some better mantras that were more suitable for little Carol. TSK, where should he find them? While thinking, Tang Un arrived outside Josiah's tent. Like Tang Un, she had her own independent space. One was because of the level of authority, and the other was because magicians needed to meditate quietly and couldn't be disturbed. Here, Tang Un raised his eyebrows. Josiah was talking to a handsome young man outside the tent. Tang Un also knew that person. It was Borg, who had a conflict with him before. Tang Un was suspicious about Bol's death. If he wasn't in a hurry to fulfill Old Bill's last wish, Tang Un would have waited for 2 more days to dig Bol's grave after he was buried. Of course, it wasn't too late to do this now. As for Borg, Tang Un was now suspicious of him. After all, he really didn't have any grudges with Bol. Their only connection was Borg, who knew each other. But why? Previously, the two of them could be considered friends in adversity. Even if their relationship was ordinary, it wouldn't be to the point of killing him for no reason. Looking at the 2 laughing people in front of him, Tang Un's heart suddenly moved. Then he touched his nose. Could it be another femme fatale? That seemed to be the most likely possibility. But it couldn't be. Previously, it was Winston. Now it was Borg. If it was really something, Tang Un would admit it. But now it was just a few kisses, the kind that didn't even stick out their tongues. Hey, Tang, you're here. Josiah looked up and saw Tang Un standing in the distance. Borg, who had his back facing him, trembled and his expression changed instantly. Tang Un shrugged and walked over. He raised his hand and greeted. Yes, Josiah, good morning. Borg suddenly chuckled and turned his head with a normal expression. Brother Tang, good morning. Twain was stunned when he heard that. Borg spoke again. I'm sorry, Brother Tang. Uncle actually committed suicide. I was too impulsive last time. Please forgive me. TSK. Tang Un came back to his senses. He curled his lips and smiled. It's okay. I was in the wrong at that time, too. Please forgive me, Brother Borg. There's a problem. If Borg had shown anger or sullenness on his face, Tang Un's suspicions would have lessened a little. But his expression was normal. TSK. You saw me the night before. Why didn't you apologize then? I've decided. I'll go dig up the grave tonight. Brother Tang, you're too serious. Borg quickly helped Tang Un up. Josiah laughed happily. It's great that you guys can be like this. We're still good friends. Yes. Tang Un smiled and nodded, seeming to agree with Josiah. He got my foot. This silly girl. All right, what were you guys talking about just now? Oh, Borg is also a candidate for this negotiation. We've been discussing countermeasures recently, Josiah explained. Borg too? Tang Un was a little surprised. But then he remembered that he had seen Minister Bosco before and was relieved. The credit for the negotiation was obvious. There was no reason not to fight for his own child. So, it was an era where one's father depended on one's status. Then Borg, I'll go and learn negotiation skills with Tang first. Yes, you can come along too, Josiah said excitedly. Tang really knows a lot. We can definitely learn something useful. Borg's expression froze. Then he waved his hand and said, I still have some things to deal with today. I won't go. Borg actually wanted to go. Of course, it was not to learn negotiation skills, but to prevent Josiah and Tang In from having a chance to be alone. But he was really worried that his resentment would be seen through by Tang In, so he had to refuse. Oh, Josiah responded regretfully and sighed. In that case, we'll go first. See you later, Borg. Goodbye. Brother Tang, goodbye. Borg gave a simple salute to the two of them, then stepped away. Tang In looked at Borg's back and narrowed his long and narrow eyes. This is a little interesting. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 226. After sending Borg off, Tang In and Josiah went to the secluded corner from yesterday and continued their training. It could be seen that Josiah had been thinking about it since he went back yesterday, so his control of his expression was not as stiff as before. Of course, in the eyes of Tang In, who was in the know, there were still many flaws. However, it should be enough to deal with the upcoming negotiators. After all, they were not familiar with Josiah. At most, they would think that this girl with good temperament in front of them was a little expressionless. After spending some time correcting the small flaws in his expression, Tang In began to talk about the knowledge of negotiation in detail. Of course, this was all from the old butler. Negotiation is actually a game. First of all, you must not panic. Don't worry, the other party is more passive than us. Not to mention that this is not a real negotiation, but a one-sided blackmail. Yes, blackmail. Put aside all the hypocrisy. You are now a pirate taking hostages. If the other party does not pay enough ransom, don't think about letting them go. The specific things will be done by Leader Lhasa and a few ministers. What you need to do is to listen quietly and then show your attitude at the right time. Principles are the most important. Upholding them requires you to be tough or unreasonable. I think the other party will be cunning people who often deal with politics. It is absolutely impossible to argue with them. So when the other party changes the topic, you have to stand up and reiterate your principles. I said before that this negotiation will not end so soon, but there will be changes if it is delayed, so there must be a deadline. If the other party drags on, you can say, well, those noble young people have not eaten for a few days. We can wait, but I can't guarantee that those people can wait. This will make them angry. Josiah could not help but laugh. This is the effect I want. After talking about some things to take note of, Tang In looked up and down at Josiah and snapped his fingers. Black. You. Josiah opened his mouth slightly and looked at his white robe. Then, as if he thought of something, he suddenly hugged his shoulders and looked at Tang In with shame and anger. Tang, you, how can you like this? I like what? I just said that you were black. Tang In was stunned and spread his hands in confusion. You're still talking. Josiah's expression was even more embarrassed. He directly squatted down with his arms crossed. Tang In said innocently, I'm saying that your appearance needs to be changed to black so that it matches your cold and calm temperament. Joshua was stunned for a moment before he covered his face. The jade-like face between her fingers was as red as blood, as if it was about to drip down. What's wrong? Nothing. Amidst the questions and answers, the sky unknowingly darkened. Finally, if the other party is not willing to ask for compensation, send someone to talk to me. Well, I'll use some tricks. At this point, Tang In laughed twice. I'll make sure they remember it for life. You're laughing so sinisterly. Professional habit. You know what I mean. Twain spread his hands. Josiah chuckled twice and then pursed his lips. Tang, actually, if you go, the effect will be much better than me. I don't know anything. That's why you have to learn. Tang In pointed to himself. I don't have much patience. If I go, I might kill them if they quarrel. You're talking nonsense again. Tang In helplessly touched his nose. Why is it that when I tell the truth, no one believes me? Don't think too much. Leader Loosa wants you to go. She naturally has her reasons. Besides, I'm the one who caught these noble youths. If I'm at the scene, Wouldn't these victims come knocking on my door? You know, these people are very rich. If they pay tens of thousands of gold coins to buy my life, I'm not afraid, but it's tiring to come out every night to pick up corpses. Haha, that makes sense. That's right. I'm a meticulous person. Shameless. Josiah recovered his relaxed expression and made a face. Tang In cooperated and made a helpless expression. Of course, this was not the reason why he did not participate in the negotiation. Since he had already rejected Luosa's heroic mission, there was no need for him to take the credit. After all, only one hero was needed. All right, it should be time for dinner. Let's go, let's go. Tang In jumped down the passage and called out, "Yes, I'm coming." After saying that, Joshua was about to jump down, but he suddenly stopped in his tracks. Then, with a cry, he fell down. With Tang In below, she naturally would not fall. However, at this time, Tang In was also a little stunned. Looking at the fluttering robe, 3 words suddenly appeared in his mind. Black. Although his mind was distracted, his body had already reflexively made a move. He turned sideways and smoothly pulled Josiah into his arms. "What? Are you going to show me your unique skill of landing face first?" No. Josiah scrambled to get up, then frowned and looked to the south of the camp. "It's magic wave again." Tang In frowned. "Magic wave?" Josiah nodded. "Yes, it's magic wave. I can't be wrong. Strange. Are there still magicians in the camp? The wave is still there? Can you pinpoint its location?" Josiah was a magician, so naturally there was no mistaking it. Besides, this was the second time it had appeared. Tang In suddenly felt uneasy. "It's still there." Josiah raised his head and opened his arms. He muttered, "The magic wave radiates to the surroundings. I can only feel it scattered. I can only pinpoint the direction. Yes, it should be over there." Josiah opened his eyes and raised his hand, pointing to a place in the south. Boom! Just a few hundred meters to the left of where Josiah was pointing, there was suddenly a loud roar, followed by flames and rolling airwaves. Colorful pieces of cloth were thrown into the air. It was a tent. That place. Tang In and Josiah looked at each other. "Captives? Oh no! F*CK. Twain's figure flashed in an instant and disappeared into the twilight. Then a voice came from afar. "Josiah, go inform Leader Losha." Josiah's speed was not fast. After running a few steps to the south, he heard the voice, stamped his feet, and ran east. "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" A long roar came faintly from afar. Then, the south side of the Gray Coat Army's encampment was set ablaze, and from time to time, there were explosions. After all, this was a place where tens of thousands of people lived. The encampment was not small. In addition to the tunnel that had already been dug, it could be said that when spread out, it was several times bigger than the army's camp. Tang In's feet tapped lightly on the soil in the tunnel, and his body swept forward like the wind. At the same time, his mind was working quickly. There was no doubt that there were uninvited guests in the encampment, and their purpose was to kidnap the noble youths. But how did they get in? The Gray Coat Army's defense was not impenetrable, but it was definitely not easy for people to come and go as they pleased. According to the level of chaos there were at least a few hundred people causing trouble at the same time. How'd they do it? Forget it. Tang In quickly cleared his mind. The most important thing now was to not let the other party kidnap the group of noble youths. Otherwise, without the captives, the army soldiers 10 miles away would instantly press down on them without any scruples. At that time, the Gray Coat Army would not be far from being destroyed. Tang In's previous position was in the western corner. Now that he was running, he was almost at the southern edge of the encampment. The soldiers of the Gray Coat Army were also urgently mobilized. Under Tang In's feet, rows of soldiers swarmed forward in the tunnel. Clang, 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 bang, bang, bang. At the edge, the sound of weapons clashing, shouts, and screams could be heard incessantly. Tang In looked down from above and saw that in the tunnel ahead, there were about 10 people in black armor blocking the intersection. 5 people in a row, they blocked the Gray Coat Army soldiers who were rushing over. He looked around and saw that the situation was the same at several intersections. Although there were only about 10 people on the other side, they were firmly stuck there like a mainstay. The anxious gray coat army soldiers kept attacking, but the other party's skills were obviously much higher. In addition to the narrow terrain, the soldiers who came up were all cut down. Tang thought for a moment and directly stepped into the tunnel, intending to cross it from above. This was not important. The key was to block the group of noble youths as soon as possible. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Unexpectedly, as soon as he stepped into the tunnel, the men in black armor who were assisting in the attack took out their crossbows and shot at him. The bowstrings vibrated and the arrows whistled. F*CK. Tang could tell from the sound that this was definitely a high-quality crossbow. Helpless, he rolled sideways into the tunnel. At this moment, 2 men in black armor threw away their crossbows and ran over with sabers in their hands. Tang flipped over and stood up. With a shake of his hand, he flashed his dagger and rushed forward. He had to break through this place as soon as possible. The 2 men in black armor were obviously proficient in cooperating in battle. They swung their sabers at him from left and right. Ding, ding, ding. As soon as they exchanged blows, Tang's heart sank. These people's fighting skills were extremely skillful. Their sabers were aimed at his vital points. It was obvious that the soldiers of the army could not compare to them. Tang was not worried about not being able to defeat them, but the gray coat army soldiers would not be able to break through in a short time. After a slight understanding of the other party's strength, Tang indecisively used his killer move. As the dagger trembled, a torrential rain of blood suddenly enveloped them. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The 2 men in black armor barely blocked a few attacks and fell into a passive state. Then, they were pushed back by the bloodlight. At the same time, the leather armor on their bodies was broken everywhere. Traces of blood poured out like a thin curtain. Bang! Bang! In a moment, the 2 figures were squeezed to the sides of the tunnel. They collapsed along the earth wall, their bodies twitching from time to time. Russell, taking advantage of this opportunity, Tang rushed forward and jumped to the south of the encampment. Then, he landed on the ground and disappeared into the tunnel. The men in black armor turned to look but did not chase after him. Obviously, their mission was to stay here and prevent the soldiers from entering. Whoosh, 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 flames danced wildly in the air like snakes. The encampment became even more chaotic. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 227. It was late at night, and dusk had fallen. Usually, this was the time for the gray coat army to eat. It would be bustling with noise and laughter. But now, flames soared into the sky, and shouts of killing could be heard everywhere. The chaos came very suddenly, and no one knew how these hundreds of people came in. They only knew that when the explosion sounded, some of the surrounding people suddenly drew their swords and charged into the crowd. There were more soldiers on the east and west sides of the gray coat army's encampment. That was because they had to guard against the attacks of the legions and lords. The south was mainly for logistics, such as the wounded barracks, where the captives were held, and so on. Of course, there were also soldiers here, but the ratio was smaller. After Tang broke through the outer blockade and entered the interior, he saw that there was fighting everywhere. The black-armored men were either alone or in groups of 2 or 3. They guarded the various points of the passage, keeping the gray coat army soldiers outside. Although the number of people was scattered and the fighting was not organized, Tang could still see the knack behind the chaos from above. The black-armored men were actually distributed in an irregular circle, forming a line of defense that cut the gray coat army's southern encampment horizontally and vertically. In the center of this circle was the most chaotic place. Through the flames, he could see a group of people killing their way to a certain place in the west. That was... Tang looked in the direction. The captive camp? Were they trying to break through there and rescue the captured legions? No. Tang quickly rejected this idea. Even with the help of these captives, they could not break out of the encampment. Boom! Just as Tang was deep in thought, a mound of dirt nearby suddenly exploded. Then, The surrounding tents were quickly set ablaze, and more than a dozen civilians rushed out of the fire in panic. However, they were greeted by a laughing black armored man and a black crystal-like object. "Wow, good evening, everyone." Boom! Waves of air rolled, and the mound collapsed. A deep pit appeared on the ground, but the dozen or so civilians disappeared. Explosive crystal? Damn it! Tang recognized this thing. The last time he saw it was in Mjolnir, but this time it was a smaller version. After the black armored man ignited the place, he didn't bother with the soldiers who were charging at him. Instead, he quickly moved away. Clearly, his mission was to create chaos. "Do you think you can escape? Hurry up and activate." His figure instantly pulled out a string of afterimages, and the dagger whistled as it pounced towards the back of the black armored man. The black armored man reacted quickly. Hearing the whistling of the wind behind him, his body leaned forward and quickly fell to the ground. Hiss! The dagger swept past his head, and Tang furrowed his brows and stepped down with his foot. Bang! The black armored man, who was about to turn around, fell to the ground in a sorry state. Hiss! The sound of the wind rose again. The black armored man quivered and quickly rolled back with his hands on the ground. Then, a curved blade appeared in his hand. Without even looking at it, the curved blade light slashed in front of him. Ding! With a spark, the two figures were almost stuck together. In such a narrow distance, any weapon would be useless. Horizontal slashes, elbows, collisions, a series of smooth and deadly moves were continuously made. In just a few seconds, the outcome of the entanglement between the two was decided. Tang clamped down on the black armored man's hands and pressed his face against the wall. Bang, bang, bang. After a few collisions, Tang waved his hand and threw the man to the ground. "Who are you?" This person's skills were much better than the two people he had killed before. Tang was now even more certain that this wasn't a soldier of the army. Huff, puff, huff, puff. The black armored man spat out the dirt in his mouth and gasped for breath. "Huh. I'm your father. Go to hell." Before he finished speaking, a black light flashed from his right hand, and he directly pressed it against his chest. Before he could make contact, a pair of large hands had already firmly grabbed his wrist and twisted. "Gotcha!" With a muffled groan, the black armored man raised his left hand without hesitation. "Gotcha! Gotcha! Gotcha!" Tang, and simply broke both of his arms at the shoulders. Huff, huff, huff. "Huh, don't think you can get anything out of me." The black armored man's face was full of mud and sweat. "Oh." Tang didn't deny it, and immediately took out 3 black explosive crystals. "If that's the case, pa." He reached out and removed the black armored man's chin, pinched it up, and stuffed the 3 crystals in. "Then I won't ask." With a faint voice, Tang lifted the black armored man and took a few steps forward. He slapped the back of the man's head with his bloody palm and threw him out. His body flew into the air and crashed into a passageway guarded by 3 black armored men. Boom! The power of the 3 explosive crystals was huge, and the surrounding passages were directly flattened. After opening a gap, Tang quickly rushed in. "Follow me." The surrounding soldiers were stunned and immediately swarmed in. If there was no need to bring people when they were in a hurry, then, after entering, they had to think of a way to gather some forces. After all, these black armored men weren't weak, and breaking through layer by layer was too slow. "You are?" "I'm the 4th of the 2nd Battalion of the Swordsman's Camp." Gray space, Tang. Without waiting for the other party to finish his introduction, Tang directly said his identity. The platoon leader was stunned, then stood up straight and saluted. "Yes, sir." Since it was a team, there had to be a leader. Only then could they exert their full strength. Although Tang's gray space team was small in number, it was still at the level of a division. In addition, he had recently made great contributions and was in the limelight. This platoon of swordsmen was naturally willing to follow his command. "Good, follow me." Tang's command was very simple, but it was also the most suitable for the current situation. They were now racing against time, and the soldiers inside wouldn't be able to hold on for long. After advancing for 100 meters, they encountered a small group of soldiers attacking two black-armored men at the intersection. Although they had the advantage in numbers, the corpses lying on the ground were all soldiers' bodies. If it weren't for the two black-armored men guarding the road, the remaining 10 or so people would have been slaughtered. "Get out of the way." Tang In rushed over like a whirlwind, waving his dagger and attacking directly. Hiss, clang, clang. Their war blades fell to the ground, and the two black-armored men covered their slashed wrists in shock. Tang In didn't care at all and passed through the two of them. When the platoon leader saw this, he immediately shouted excitedly, "Kill them!" Dozens of large swords were swung in an instant, and the injured black-armored men naturally couldn't withstand it. Blood spurted out, and they were instantly cut to the ground. After killing these two men, the group of swordsmen immediately chased after Tang In. The 10 or so soldiers from before saw the black-armored men that they couldn't defeat being slaughtered in an instant, and they all stood there stupidly. Then they came back to their senses and hurriedly followed. When these people ran to the next intersection, they also saw 3 black-armored men lying on the wall with their arms and thighs cut. "Haha, brothers, let's go." Under Tang In's lead, this group of soldiers went straight to the central hinterland like a hot knife through butter. At the same time, their team gradually grew stronger after absorbing the scattered soldiers on the road. This battle was so satisfying. They almost didn't need to use much strength to kill the black-armored men that they had previously regarded as devils. At the same time, they were also secretly shocked by Tang In's strength. When they heard that the gray space had made such a great contribution, they were more or less unconvinced, thinking that it was just good luck. But now, it seemed that it was only natural. Other than guarding the main road, some of the black-armored men who launched the surprise attack were also fighting on the move. So, the movement here was quickly noticed, and a large group of black-armored men began to gather. Tang In's breakthrough began to be hindered. After all, these people were not weak, and some of them were good at cooperating. On his side, he was fighting alone. Seeing this, Tang In decisively said to the soldiers behind him, "I'll lead them away. You guys continue to break through." After saying that, he feinted and directly jumped over the wall. The black-armored men's attention was all on Tang In. As for the ordinary soldiers, they didn't care about them, so they immediately chased after him. Since they were already here, the soldiers were ready to risk it all. The squadron leader roared, "Brothers, it's up to us now. Kill them. Even if we have to sacrifice our lives, we must make a path. Kill, kill, kill." The soldiers raised their weapons and rushed forward like a torrent. On the battlefield, the difference in strength didn't matter. The key was the aura. Previously, they were shocked by the black-armored men's skills and were a little hesitant to attack. But now that they had killed so many, they had built up a psychological advantage. These people were not invincible, nor were they unkillable. They all had a head on their shoulders. Who was afraid of who? On this side, Tang In stopped breaking through and began to run around. The black-armored men behind him gradually began to see how terrifying Tang In was. Corners turned shadows. Every place became a battlefield for assassinations. Not only did they fail to catch up, but they also suffered casualties. Speed up, shake them off, hide, and kill in one shot. This was the fighting style Tang In was most familiar with. If not for the fact that he was in a hurry to break through, Tang In was confident that he could kill all the black-armored men behind him. Damn it, this won't do. After failing to encircle him again and losing one of his men, a burly black-armored man said angrily, "This person is a F***king assassin. If we continue to chase him like this, we'll definitely be killed one by one." "Then what do you think we should do?" the black-armored man asked. "Anyway, I don't agree with the encirclement. This person is too fast. If this continues, I'll take my men and withdraw. Although the bounty is high, we need to be alive to spend it. Call for backup. Let Goshawk kill him." "Goshawk." The remaining black-armored men trembled, then agreed. "All right, let's do that." Seeing that everyone agreed, the burly black-armored man took out something and threw it into the air. Whoosh bang! A ray of blood-red light shot up and instantly exploded in the air. Spots of light flickered and finally formed the shape of an arrow. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come again. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 228. The number of recommendation tickets for raccoons is too shabby. I sincerely hope that all of you can leave your recommendation tickets for me every day. Thank you. South of the encampment, the center of the chaos, a group of black-armored men surrounded the dozen or so noble youths, constantly advancing forward. Although there were many gray-coat army soldiers coming to intercept them, they were unable to slow down their speed. Haha, break for me. Chi. A huge red blade, like a crescent moon, broke through the air and cut into the middle of the soldiers gathered in front. Hiss! Under such powerful fighting energy, the armor of the soldiers in front was instantly torn apart like paper. The blade continued to advance, penetrating 4 or 5 rows of soldiers. Haha, explode. Boom! The red blade that had lost its momentum suddenly shone brightly and directly exploded in the crowd. Suddenly, fighting energy overflowed and waves of air rolled. Blood poured like rain, and broken limbs flew like catkins. Haha, this is the feeling. Awesome, too awesome. A burly man in black armor spread his arms like he was standing on top of a mountain, his face full of enjoyment. To him, the rain of blood was like a fresh morning breeze in the mountains. Oliver, you big pervert. With a delicate shout, a blonde woman next to the burly man with a seductive figure leaped away like a mountain cat, avoiding the hot blood. Commander, don't you care about him? The woman who retreated narrowed her eyes and acted coquettishly to the silver-haired young man next to her. Her voice was decadent and intoxicating. The silver-haired man spread his hands and said helplessly, "You know, I've said it many times, but he almost dirted my new clothes this time." The woman pointed the dagger in her hand at the black armor that only protected the vital parts and private parts of her body, and pouted in dissatisfaction. The silver-haired man touched his forehead and sighed. "That's armor, Eunice. Isn't it just clothes?" The woman called Eunice carefully wiped the dust off the black armor. "These clothes are very good, very comfortable to wear. Leader, we've completed our mission this time. Should we return these clothes to them?" "Of course we have to return it. The suits we're wearing are made from the skin of the black rock dragon lizard. It's worth a lot," the silver-haired man replied casually. However, when he saw the dangerous glint in the eyes of the seductive woman beside him, he quickly changed his words. "But if you really like it, you can exchange it with the bounty this time." "That's more like it." Eunice snorted and picked up the black dagger. "Whoever dares to snatch my clothes, I'll take his life." "Leader, Wildcat, what are you guys talking about?" The burly man, named Oliver, seemed to have finished enjoying himself. He walked back with his giant sword. "Big monkey, stay away from me." Eunice seemed to be unable to bear the filth on the other party's body. She covered her nose and quickly jumped away. Then, she grabbed her dagger and said angrily, "I'm a wild leopard, not a wild cat. If you shout again, I'll kill you." "All right, Wildcat," said Oliver carelessly. "You?" Eunice's expression changed. She waved her dagger and was about to attack. However, when she saw the bloodstains on the other party's body, she stopped in her tracks. "Remember this. I'll settle this with you later." After saying that, she swung her blonde hair. Her figure flashed in front of the gray-coat army soldiers like a ghost. Sudden stab, throat slash, back attack, a series of fatal attacks were launched. It seemed that she was venting her dissatisfaction. Her speed was so fast that the surrounding soldiers could only slash at her afterimage. Before they could retrieve their weapons, the other party's dagger had already slashed at their vitals. Soon, the group of soldiers who rushed up were completely annihilated by this enchanting figure. TSK, this wildcat's claws are very sharp. Behind them, Oliver smacked his lips and sighed. "That's why I told you not to provoke her." The silver-haired man looked at the chaotic situation around him and said casually, "Hee hee, I still want to touch her." Oliver licked his lips and said in a crazy tone, This kind of opponent is more enjoyable to fight. You're asking for trouble. The silver-haired man said disapprovingly. If you provoke her, you won't even be able to sleep peacefully. Oliver looked at the figure that appeared and disappeared mysteriously in the crowd and scratched his head. That's true. At this time, the silver-haired man frowned. Strange, why did the explosion stop? It means that the kid who played with the exploding crystal was killed. Oliver shook the blood off his giant saber indifferently. Captain, the 5 of us are good enough. Why did you have to add that kid? He's so weak. The silver-haired man shook his head. Strength doesn't decide everything. Sometimes a special attack can have an unexpected effect. Think about it. If he hadn't blown up the defense, would we have been able to rescue them so smoothly? I could have split those useless soldiers apart by myself, but that would have slowed down the time, the silver-haired man said faintly. The silver-haired man said indifferently and then shook his head. I just felt that there was something wrong with that huge explosion. It seems that he really was killed. What a pity. Although the 2 of them spoke unhurriedly, the group's speed didn't decrease at all. Because of Oliver and Eunice's actions, the group's speed increased. Hey, you came to rescue us. Why didn't you break through to the south of the encampment? A few noble youths walked over from behind and questioned. They couldn't be blamed for asking this question. It was a very obvious question. Since they had rescued them, they should have broken through the encirclement in the nearest direction. But now they were heading west. Wasn't this giving up what was close at hand for what was far away? The noble youths didn't get an answer to their questions. In fact, the 2 of them didn't even pay attention to them. The silver-haired man continued to command the black-armored men to head west, while Oliver silently wiped his giant saber. How dare you? The noble youths had never been looked down upon like this. One of them pointed at the silver-haired man and said angrily, "Didn't you hear what I said?" The noble youth was a bit out of control. After all, these people had come to rescue them. But when the light of escape was at hand, this side made a stupid move. How could they not be anxious? Ha! Oliver suddenly cracked his lips into a soundless chuckle as he looked at the questioning young noble with great interest. At this time, the silver-haired man calmly turned his head and looked at the finger in front of him. He said indifferently, "Perhaps you don't know, but I hate it when people point at me." The noble youth looked at the silver-haired man's calm eyes. His heart suddenly trembled, and he couldn't help but retract his outstretched finger. But his long-term superior mentality made him stop and continue to point. "I'm pointing." Ugh! The noble youth felt a chill in his hand. He looked on helplessly as the outstretched finger suddenly and inexplicably disappeared. Then blood spurted out. A belated scream suddenly sounded, drowning out the sounds of fighting in the surroundings. This was probably the most serious injury he had ever received in his life. "You should be glad." The silver-haired man bent over to pick up the severed finger and stuffed it into the noble youth's hand. "If any one of you died, there would be no reward." He patted the youth's shoulder. "Take it. With your family's connections, it should be easy to ask the Temple of Light for help. Don't cry. This can still be fixed." He was really trying his best to persuade her with kind words after doing all this. The silver-haired man looked up and said calmly, "Do you have any other questions?" The noble youths' faces were pale, and they kept shaking their heads and retreating. "Very good." As if nothing had been done, the silver-haired man turned around and continued to command. At this time, bang, there was an explosion in the distance. Oliver looked up in surprise and saw the shape of an arrow imprinted in the air. After a few seconds, the symbol disappeared. "They need the help of Goshawk. This group of trash really disgraces our profession." The silver-haired man shook his head. "Don't underestimate the strength of the Gray Coat Army. To be able to fight against the Empire for so many years, there must be some outstanding talents." That's a pity." Oliver grinned cruelly. "Goshawk never leaves anyone alive under his arrows." Although this sentence was absolute, the silver-haired man did not express any objection. Obviously, he was also very optimistic that Goshawk could quickly eliminate the threat over there. "Let's go. The other party has completely reacted. We need to speed up now." "Okay." Oliver laughed and strode to the front of the group with a huge sword in one hand. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come a Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 229. The arrow-shaped symbol was so eye-catching that Tang In naturally saw it, but he did not understand what it meant. At this time, he was hiding in the shadows behind an earth wall. However, after 3 minutes, he still did not see the group of black armor men chasing after him. He could not help but feel puzzled. Although his speed of escaping was fast enough, in order to assassinate them, he did not close the distance by much. Logically speaking, it would only take a moment for the group of black armor men to catch up. Were they not going to chase after him? Tang In walked out of the shadows and rushed to the south. His primary goal was to break in, and he did not have much time to waste on these people. There! Tang In turned around and saw that the group of black armor men did not move. They only pointed at him when they saw him coming out. However, although they had discovered him, they still did not chase after him. What's going on? Tang In frowned. He did not understand. However, since they did not chase after him, he would not kill them. After thinking for a while, Tang In stepped forward and rushed inside. Suddenly, his galloping figure stopped in an instant, defying inertia. At this moment, whoosh, with a soft sound, a black shadow quickly brushed past his eyes. Bang! It was nailed to the earth wall on his left. Tang In's figure flashed and stuck to the right wall. At this time, a drop of cold sweat fell from his forehead. The arrow nailed to the left wall was an ordinary arrow, but it almost took Tang In's life. How could it be? Tang In boasted that he was quite sensitive to killing intent. If someone aimed an arrow at him, he should be able to sense it. However, the arrow just now had reached him silently. If he had not stopped when he heard the arrow, his head would have been blown off. This was definitely an expert archer. Tang In's body shook. He subconsciously turned and slid sideways, instantly retreating a foot. Bang! 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 A green arrow pierced through the wall he was hiding in, and then it pierced through the wall on the left, leaving 2 small holes. F***CK. Do you have to be so godly? You can still see me even when I'm hiding here. Normal people would need to take a breather to calm themselves down after avoiding a fatal danger. The other party obviously knew this, but even if they knew, it was still not easy to hit the target and penetrate several earth walls. Tang In retreated a few more feet. Judging from the direction of the arrow, the enemy should be diagonally above him in the south. It was impossible to see Tang In walking along the wall from there. I'd like to see how you're going to aim this time. Tang In muttered and was about to climb up the wall. Passively taking a beating was not his style. Finding a way to counterattack was the way to go. However, at this moment, bang, 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 several green arrows pierced through the earthen wall like a torrential rain of pear blossoms. Although they didn't hit Tang In, the scattered attacks made the corner of his eyes twitch. Not far away, there were also a few screams. Needless to say, there were definitely unlucky people who were shot. F***CK, you win. Tang In jumped out, sticking close to the ground, and ran toward the entrance of the passage. Now, both of them couldn't see each other. Logically speaking, the archer who was attacking should be at a disadvantage. However, now that the archer was shooting arrows at will, Tang In wasn't in a good spot. Due to the obstruction of the earth wall, he couldn't see the direction of the arrows at all. By the time he saw them, the arrows had already penetrated the earth wall and reached him. In this way, the danger was undoubtedly much greater. Therefore, he could only be forced to rush out of the passage. In this way, the archer could see him, and he could also see the direction of the arrows. The two would cancel each other out. Well, the archer still had the advantage. Bang, 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 whoosh. As the earth flew, Tang In quickly jumped out of the passage and immediately looked to the south. The arrows were shot from the south of the station, but Tang In couldn't see them even with his eyesight. This was outside the station? It couldn't be. F***CK, a sniper rifle. Tang In opened his mouth, a little stunned. It must be known that the outside of the station was at least a few thousand meters away from here. Such a long distance, yet such a godlike archery. Not to mention other things, but in terms of archery, Tang Un was much better than him. While he was in a daze, the arrows that were constantly shooting at the earth wall suddenly stopped. Tang In quivered and ran forward without hesitation. Sure enough, in just a few seconds, an arrow was shot at him like a shadow. Seeing the incoming arrows, Tang In took a step to the left to dodge. However, at this time, the corner of his eyes swept over a few black shadows. His heart trembling, Tang In retracted his left foot and jumped back. Bang! 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 The first arrow was shot at the place where Tang Un was originally standing. The next 3 arrows were shot at the front, left, and right of him in a triangular formation. F*CK. Tang Un looked at the arrows nailed to the ground and sucked in a breath of cold air. The interval between the 2 attacks was very short. It was obvious that the opponent had seen Tang Un's speed clearly, and then predicted the arrows that were shot. If he had not forcefully twisted his body and jumped back, no matter which direction he went, he would have undoubtedly died. Such thinking, such archery, this could no longer be described as an expert. It was simply a godlike skill. Tang Un's mind raced. He suddenly rushed out to the left. After a few steps, he suddenly turned 90 degrees, went straight, and changed directions again, constantly changing speed and rhythm, madly changing directions. Under the shadow of death, Tang Un did not dare to take it lightly. Such a move obviously made the opponent somewhat unable to adapt. The arrows that were shot did not have any effect. Then the attack stopped. The surrounding people saw Tang Un inexplicably dodging alone. This scene was obviously a little funny. However, Tang Un did not dare to be careless. The arrows that were not shot were the biggest threat. Tang Un now felt like he was walking on a small road at night, with a poisonous snake following him from the bushes. As long as he was the slightest bit careless, he would be greeted with a fatal blow. In fact, his best choice now was to turn south and approach to kill the opponent. However, the current situation of the encampment was imminent. He had no choice but to rush inside. What should I do? What should I do? Tang Un looked at the black armored man who was fighting with the soldiers not far away. His eyes lit up, and then he kept moving closer. I'm the captain of the gray space, Tang Un. Leave this to me. You guys step back. The attacking soldiers were stunned by this roar, and then involuntarily retreated. They had heard of Tang Un's fierce reputation. Since he wanted to help, the soldiers naturally had no reason to not step aside. After another change in rhythm, Twain's figure suddenly closed in on the black armor man. In close combat, his strength was not comparable to these people. In just a few seconds, Tang Un captured the 2 black armored men. After swiftly breaking their limbs, Tang Un lifted the black armored men toward the south, one in each hand. I'd like to see how you're going to attack this time. After a few seconds, there was no movement at all. Phew! Tang Un breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that the opponent still had some scruples. This made things easier. Suddenly, whoosh, the hair-raising sound of an arrow was heard again. Tang Un's heart tightened. He could not help but curse. Damn it, you're attacking your own people. Do you have any humanity? At this time, the 2 black armored men in his hands trembled violently and shouted in fear. Goshawk, no. This was because the 2 of them blocked his view. Tang Un only realized that the arrow was a little strange. In front of the arrowhead, there seemed to be a ball of flame surrounding it. Boom! There was an explosion and the entrance of the tunnel collapsed. Suddenly, dust filled the air and flames soared to the sky. The retreating soldiers were thrown to the ground by the rolling airwaves. They stared blankly at this scene. The captain of the gray space was dead. Whoosh! A red figure jumped out of the sea of fire and rolled continuously on the ground, raising waves of dirt. It was like a long dragon that reached the bottom of the earth wall. The flames were extinguished. Chapter 230. There was a saying in the other world about cultivation. Magic depended on innate talent, while battle chi depended on acquired talent. Innate talent referred to things like talent. As for acquired talent, it referred to continuous hard work. Although this statement was somewhat biased, it did explain some things. The cultivation of battle chi was more difficult than magic. Moreover, in the early stages, it was weaker. However, if a battle chi warrior could reach the void level, they would enter a new realm. At that time, the warrior would have the ability to fly and would not be inferior to a magician of the same level. In a life and death battle, they would even have an advantage. After all, warriors who could reach this realm had to fight their way through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. However, it was not easy to reach the void level. Because of talent, there were tens of thousands of people who cultivated battle chi in the other world. However, among them, there was less than 1 in 10,000 who could reach the void level. No one could imagine that among the gray coat army that the brand officials called rioters and bandits, there would be a warrior who could stand out of thin air. Zhuofan's sword landed in front of the intruders. Most of the black armor men were sent flying, but did not hurt the dozen or so noble youths behind them. His control of power was so precise that it made people gasp in amazement. After breaking a few arrows that were shot at him, Zhuofan descended from the sky. At this moment, bang! A tall and sturdy blue figure rushed out from the huge depression formed by the golden sword slash. Then, a burst of arrogant laughter rang through the sky. Haha, so you haven't reached the void level yet. This person was Oliver, who was holding a giant battle sword. His hair was disheveled and blood flowed from his mouth and eyes. However, he did not care at all. His eyes were blood red as he looked at Zhuofan. This sentence was not without reason. If Zhuofan was a void-level warrior, then that sword slash should have killed him. Zhuofan did not refute, nor did he admit it. He only calmly raised the 3-foot-long golden sword. The silver-haired man and the others trembled and immediately prepared themselves. To be able to stand out of thin air, even if he had not reached the void level, he was at least half a step in. It would not be difficult to defeat or even kill them. Zhuofan's sword moved. The golden light on it flowed like water. Then, in a flash, it silently pierced towards Oliver's chest. Roar! Oliver's aura expanded like that of a lion's, and his enormous war blade exploded with blue light, sending a heavy chop forward. If one were to look at the fighting auras of the two sides, Oliver was undoubtedly stronger. His blue aura surged like a raging flood. But unfortunately, the result was not so. Before the sword and saber were solid, the do chi on them tangled together and then collapsed. Boom! With an unwilling roar, Ollie was sent flying with his sword. His blue body smashed through a dozen earth walls like a cannonball. Zhuofan was about to take a step forward to give chase when he suddenly frowned and his body swayed to the side. At this time, the space where he was just a moment ago rippled like water, and a black dagger stabbed out silently. Then, an enchanting figure appeared. Hee, handsome, don't be in such a hurry to leave. Eunice revealed a sweet smile as a soft and charming voice rang out. Zhuofan's expression didn't change. He swung his golden radiance sword to the left. Ding! Ouch! With a coquettish cry, Eunice's figure reappeared. Like the wind, she retreated more than 30 meters before dissolving the tyrannical power of the golden radiance sword. At this time, Eunice's smiling figure in front of Zhuofan faintly dissipated. Roar! A roar like that of a giant beast deep in the mountains rang out. An earth wall was lifted by some kind of power and directly smashed towards Zhuofan. Chi! The golden radiance sword appeared again, sweeping across several meters and hitting the center of the earth wall. Boom! The earth was smashed into pieces by the tyrannical radiance sword. Chop! A blue giant suddenly rushed out from the fog-like dust, followed by an enormous blue radiant sword that was like a towering ancient tree. This was Oliver, but at this time, he didn't look like a normal human being. His body had almost doubled in size, and the black armor on his body looked like a toy. He stepped forward, and the earth shook. Earth-level warrior. Zwafan muttered something that only he could hear. That's right. Oliver's situation clearly showed that he had borrowed external power, and this was the symbol of an Earth-level warrior. "Huh, Big Monkey, you're serious." Eunice laughed. "Looks like I have to be serious, too." Saying this, a faint black fog suddenly appeared out of thin air, enveloping her graceful figure. Then, this black fog floated towards Zwafan, who was fiercely fighting. Gold, black, and blue. The three colors of light bloomed in the field. Fighting energy swept across the surrounding area, and in an instant, all the earth walls were directly flattened, forming a battle circle that mortals couldn't enter. Phew, this mission is a big loss. The silver-haired man on the periphery sighed, and then gathered the black armored men again. He helped the dazed, noble youths to the side. Chi! After a few steps, a golden radiance sword cleaved towards them. Needless to say, this was Zhuofan's attack. Despite being surrounded by two Earth-grade martial artists, he was still able to control the entire situation with ease. He immediately launched an attack to cut off these people's escape route. The silver-haired man helplessly shook his head, turned around, opened his hands, and pushed. Hiss, 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 as if gathering countless wind whistles, the golden radiance sword suddenly stopped a meter away from the silver-haired man's palms, as if it was blocked by something. As the golden radiance sword flowed, bits of silver light flickered and gathered, finally forming a silver cocoon. If someone was more attentive and sharper, they would discover that the silver cocoon was actually made up of transparent threads. Bang! This stalemate didn't last for more than a few seconds before the silver cocoon shattered. The silver-haired man staggered back, sliding to the side to dodge the golden radiance sword. However, the black armored men behind him weren't as strong. About 5 or 6 of them didn't even have time to struggle before they were sent flying. Their black armor was dented, and blood sprayed into the air. It was obvious that they were dead. This was the result of the silver-haired man blocking the attack first. Otherwise, the black armored men wouldn't have been able to escape. The silver-haired man pointed at the noble youths and said to the remaining black armored men, "I'll block it. You guys take these people to the magic array." Saying this, he stepped into the battle circle and headed towards the center of the fighting energy. The moment the Do Chi came close to him, it was blocked by a flash of silver light. When he officially joined the encirclement, the battle circle became even more intense. All kinds of fighting energy mixed together, dazzling people from afar. However, it was only suitable for watching from afar. If a normal person came close, any one of the scattered fighting energy would be enough to kill them. Zwafan didn't panic at all under the coordinated attacks of these 3 people. Attack, defense, attack, attack. The golden radiant sword was like a pillar that blocked all kinds of attacks. At other times, it was like a king looking down on the world, suppressing all kinds of fighting energy. This was the power of a Void Realm warrior. Although he only stepped into the Void Realm, he was able to beat up 3 Earth Realm warriors who had been through hundreds of battles. Combined, Zwafan spat out a clear word for the first time. The golden radiance sword that had been flowing like water suddenly shone brightly. It was as if a small sun had appeared on the golden radiance sword that was raised high. Dazzle, another clear word. The small suns that were converging on each other exploded, releasing countless beams of dazzling golden light. Bang, bang, bang. Boom, boom, boom. Amidst the continuous sounds of collision, the silver, black, and blue fighting energy was swept away. As if clearing the battlefield, the golden radiance sword occupied the entire battle circle. Pooh, Pu. Under such a tyrannical attack, the silver-haired man, Oliver, and Eunice all spat out blood and flew back. Eunice was the most miserable. She was a speed-type person, so her defense was naturally weaker. The black fog around her was almost completely swept away by the golden radiance sword, revealing her pale face. Zwafan's attack was effective, but he didn't follow up with another attack. Instead, he flashed towards a group of black armored people. Obviously, he knew that this was the key point. Oliver and I will go. Eunice, summon the goshawk to help. The silver-haired man quickly ordered. Then, he and Oliver leapt forward. Long-range attacks were the best choice to stop the enemy. The silver-haired man believed that as long as they could hold on tightly, and with the goshawk's constant interference, they would definitely be able to let the group of noble youths reach the captive camp. There was a magic teleportation array that would send them here. Whoosh bang! The arrow-shaped symbol appeared in the air once again. However, after the three of them had tangled with the goshawk for a while, an arrow finally arrived. In the end, it was easily shattered by Fan. After that, no more arrows came to help. The silver-haired man blocked a golden radiant sword and retreated a few steps. He looked towards the south in surprise. The goshawk was entangled. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 231. If you asked the Tang Yin of the past what his favorite character was in an assassin movie, he would say that it was the one with the sniper rifle. He believed that many people would say the same thing. What was the reason? Who knew? Maybe it was the thrill of shooting someone from afar? Or maybe it was because the sniper rifle looked more domineering? Or maybe it was because he liked the feeling of quietly putting the crosshair on the target's head, curling his lips and smiling, and then pulling the trigger. There are no sniper rifles in this world. This was certain. Of course, there were still long-range weapons. For example, the most classic bow and arrow. Compared to the former, it was much worse in terms of distance, accuracy, and so on. It was also not easy to master it. There was no other way. After all, its composition was too simple. Bow and arrow. Dagger. Tang Yin knew how to use both weapons. Of course, he was more inclined towards the dagger, as he spent more time practicing on it. This choice was not wrong, although the dagger could shorten the distance and make the battle more dangerous. However, it was able to control the battle very well. After all, you couldn't use a bow and arrow to hold someone hostage from hundreds of meters away. That was something that could only be done with a sniper rifle. Moreover, shooting with a bow and arrow required time. The farther the distance, the more uncertain the outcome. This was the so-called a difference of a millimeter could lead to a loss of 1,000 miles. But now, Tang Yin, who was temporarily hiding in the corner, looked at the bow and arrow nailed to his feet. He couldn't help but sigh. This is clearly a F***King sniper rifle. Just now, he took advantage of Fan's domineering appearance to suddenly turn south. The opponent, named Goshawk, instantly understood his intention and immediately turned his bow and arrow around, using sharp attacks to firmly suppress him in the encampment. The bow and arrow was a long-range weapon. No archer would allow the enemy to get close. Tang Yin moved forward in a very difficult manner. He pounced, dodged, rolled, moved. He used almost all the ways he could move, and repeatedly brushed past the whistling arrows. His current position was not far from the edge of the encampment, but there were two large sections of spacious space in front of him. If it were any other time, he would have been able to swagger over. But now, it was like a natural moat that could not be crossed. Looking around, Tang Yin's eyes lit up. He carefully dragged a dead gray coat army soldier over, took off his plate armor, and walked to the entrance of the passage with his back bent. Whoosh! The plate armor was tossed backward. His figure was already sprinting forward at lightning speed. Bang! The plate armor that had just flown out of the wall was pinned to the back by an arrow with a barb. Huff! Huff! Tang Yin once again hid behind a bunker. Although it was only a short distance, he was already gasping for breath, and sweat could be seen on his forehead. The thick shadow of death shrouded his heart. It was as if there was a grim reaper holding a sickle by his side, constantly urging him to die. Die quickly, die quickly. Why aren't you dead yet? Shaking his head, Tang Yin grabbed another corpse and took off the plate armor. But this time, he was not in a hurry to rush out. Instead, he made a small device and tied the plate armor to the top of the wall, using torn cloth from the tent. Then, he dragged the other end of the long rope to the side of the passage. pulling and loosening. Half of the plate armor popped out and immediately dived back down. There was no movement. Pulling and loosening again, there was still no reaction. TSK, TSK. Tang In smacked his lips twice and was about to pull again. Whoosh, 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 bang, bang, bang. 3 arrows that came at high speed penetrated the earth wall below the plate armor, and in an instant 3 more arrows were shot in the surroundings. Ha! With a long laugh, Tang In flashed out again. He crossed a large distance and arrived at the bottom of the passage at the edge of the encampment. Sure enough, no matter how cunning a fox, yes, no matter how shrewd a hunter is, he can't beat a good fox. The goshawk's attack stopped. This was expected. After all, it was not an earth wall, but earth. No matter how heavy the arrow was, it could not penetrate it. After a moment of pride, Tang Un's expression became serious again. He took out his dagger and tidied up his equipment. Next was the time for a life-and-death battle. The goshawk was about 1,000 meters away. In front of them was a vast and empty valley without any obstructions or obstructions. In fact, if it was a normal archer, he would have already retreated. However, Tang Un believed that the goshawk would not. From the moment he dodged the first arrow, the battle between the two had begun. I'll bet. If I don't pass, I'll die. If I pass, I'll kill you. After taking a few steps to the left, Tang Un instantly jumped to the ground. Without waiting to move forward, he first changed directions like a ghost. Whoosh! The arrow penetrated the illusion. Roar! Come on! A loud roar was heard and spread far and wide. Haste, activate! Phantom, activate! Heart of Still Water, activate! In an instant, he activated 3 skills that he could use. Tang Un's body changed 1,000 times. The ground was densely covered with moving afterimages of different sizes. Forward, forward, forward. From the moment he stepped on the ground, there was no turning back. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The hair-raising, whistling sound of arrows was like a violent wind that did not stop for a moment. Tang Un had never known that a person could shoot an arrow so quickly and so accurately. This was not a sniper rifle. This was a F*King sniper machine gun. Afterimages appeared one after another, but they were all shot through. Tang Un stared at the trajectory of the whistling arrows and kept dodging them. Although jumping to the ground exposed him to the goshawk's vision, it was not without benefits. At least there was now more space for him to dodge. 1,000 meters. Under normal circumstances, Tang Un could pass through in less than 10 seconds if he was in his full state. However, he only walked less than 100 meters despite using all his tricks. Fear? Panic? Suffering? No. After activating Heart of Still Water, Tang Un's mind was filled with nothing but calculating the speed and trajectory of the arrows at that moment. The whistling sound of the arrows suddenly stopped. Tang Un's expression changed. Then he twisted his body even more crazily. Was the goshawk tired? Was he running away? Impossible. Due to the close distance and the goshawk's undisguised movements, Tang Un could clearly sense the cold, murderous intent in front of him. Therefore, this pause could only mean that the goshawk was preparing for a big move. The unknown was the most terrifying thing. The feeling of knowing that the opponent was preparing for an attack, while he could only take it head-on, was not good. Tang Un licked his lips as he ran. Come on, come on. Whoosh, whoosh, hiss, hiss. The long-awaited attack finally arrived. Before the arrows arrived, Tang Un frowned. This whistling sound doesn't sound right. More than 10 arrows appeared in his sight, one after another. Some were fast, some were slow, some were straight, some were, curved. Tang Un's expression changed drastically. He no longer had the time to consider how the goshawk had shot the arrows with such beautiful arcs. His mind was constantly circling and calculating the trajectories of the dozens of arrows, as well as finding the blind spots. 3.5 steps to the left? No, that curved arrow would penetrate that place. 2 steps to the right? No, that's a trap. The last slow arrow would pass by. Found it. Tang Un's eyes lit up. He leaned forward and jumped to the side. Suddenly, ding, 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 more than 10 crisp sounds like wind chimes rang out. It was very pleasant to the ears. However, to Tang Un, This pleasant sound was clearly a sonata welcoming the arrival of the Grim Reaper. More than 10 meters in front of him, the trajectory of the arrows changed abruptly due to the sudden insertion of a curved arrow. It's too late. Tang and did not even have the time to panic. His figure was still rushing to the predetermined location, but there was an additional dagger in front of him. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Ding! Damn it! Looking at the arrows that were deflected by the dagger, Tang In was not happy at all because he knew what would happen next. Whoosh! As expected, a cone-shaped arrow hit the left side of his chest, but Tang In's body had stopped moving because of the arrow that had been sent flying. The old force was gone, and the new force was not born. Crack. Puff. With a muffled groan, blood bloomed. The cold conical arrow pierced through his chest. Thud, thud, thud. His body continued to move forward dozens of meters due to inertia. Then, his footsteps came to a halt, and his body staggered forward a few steps. Perhaps it was because a hero cherished another hero, or perhaps it was for some other reason. The goshawk did not shoot another arrow. Yes, there's no need for that. It's already pierced through my heart. I'm dead for sure. Tang In's figure was like a willow branch in a strong wind. He was about to fall to the ground, but he continued to move forward a few steps unyieldingly. The arrow still didn't come. That's right. His unwillingness to admit defeat is worthy of respect, even if he's an opponent. Tang In moved forward a few more meters. Well, this person's vitality is really tenacious. He moved forward a few more meters. He moved forward a few more meters. Whoosh! Just when Tang In was about to fall to the ground for 100 meters, the goshawk could not take it anymore and shot an arrow at his head. He stepped to the side, shook his head, and whoosh, Tang In, who was in a near-death state, suddenly sprinted forward. You're too naive to want to kill me so much. His roar was loud and full of energy. How was this the sound of a dying person? It turned out that the arrow had pierced through his chest, but it had not pierced his heart. Of course, it was not because of the goshawk's archery skills, but because Tang In had used the bone shrinkage skill in that instant. The arrow that was originally aimed at his heart was 1 inch higher. It was only 1 inch, but it was the distance between life and death. After running and deceiving, Tang In was now about 600 meters away from the goshawk. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh from the torrential rain of arrows. It was obvious that the goshawk was angry. This was normal. He originally thought that Tang In was an opponent worthy of respect, so he did not continue to attack the dead. Unexpectedly, he was wrong. His opponent turned out to be a shameless liar. Of course, Tang In was not aware of this. Shameless? Which thief or assassin is not shameless? Angry? Good, I want you to be angry. After experiencing a life and death situation, Tang In did not dare to be careless anymore. He would rather take 10 steps around the target than force himself to take a step forward. In such a vast wilderness, it was difficult for his running figure to be surrounded by arrows again. After a while, Tang In's heart skipped a beat. This arrow doesn't seem to be so accurate. Tang In paused his steps and stopped instantly. Whoosh! An arrow shot past 3 inches away from him. As expected, it's a few hundred meters away, and there's only such a small error. But who's the other party? It's the goshawk who can still send an arrow to the predicted location from a few thousand meters away. Abnormal. This is too abnormal. But what's the reason for this? The goshawk's own factor can be ruled out, so it must be an external factor. But here, the wilderness is empty, and the dark stars are hanging low. Tang In suddenly turned his head. Needless to say, there was only darkness behind him. I see. Tang In could not help but want to laugh out loud. He finally knew why the goshawk had lost its standard. The reason was actually very simple. It was the light. Previously, whether Tang In was in the encampment or on the ground, there were flames beside and behind him. The goshawk was hidden in the darkness, so naturally it could see it clearly. However, now that Tang In was running around, he had already deviated from the flames behind him. The goshawk was observing from the dark and could no longer see Tang Un's ghostly figure clearly. Damn it, it's finally my turn. Tang Un took out his dagger and no longer hesitated. He rushed in an arc toward the arrow. Suddenly, boom, there was an explosion more than 10 meters away from him, and flames soared into the sky. This should be the arrow that blew up Tang Un previously. TSK, you're quite smart. Tang Un smacked his lips twice and quickly ran toward the shadows outside the flames. I'd like to see how many more of these arrows you can shoot. This kind of special tool was like the explosive crystal. Most of them were military supplies. Of course, they could also be sold in the black market, but they must be expensive. Therefore, Tang Un did not believe that the goshawk had many of these things in his hands. Boom! Tang Un escaped from the flames in a sorry state. Boom! A piece of flesh was torn off the outside of his left arm by the barbed arrow. Boom! A long bloody groove was left on his lower abdomen. After 3 explosions, Tang Un was 200 meters closer. The goshawk did not shoot any more arrows. Once again, he sprinted 50 meters forward. In the blurry twilight, Tang Un saw a lookout tower piled up with dozens of tree trunks. When he looked up, he saw a slender black figure standing on the platform. His long robes fluttered in the cold night wind, making him look like a goshawk gliding with its wings spread. At that moment, they were less than 300 meters apart. Although he could not see the goshawk's eyes, Tang Un could feel that the goshawk was watching him. Goshawk! A slightly sharp voice was heard against the night wind. Tang Un. After quickly looking around, Tang Un answered casually. Very well. You're the only prey that escaped from my arrows. I'll remember you. Tang Un was startled. He quickly raised his dagger and made a throat-slitting gesture at the goshawk. Following that, he dashed toward the lookout tower at lightning speed. Tang Un heard the goshawk's intention to retreat. He made the provocative gesture in hopes of provoking the goshawk to stay for a fight. The goshawk shook his head and turned around. Damn it! Tang Un glared at the goshawk indignantly. Generally speaking, archers were not good at close combat. Therefore, they were not slow to get rid of their enemies. If the goshawk ran away at full speed, Tang Un was not confident that he could stop him. After all, the goshawk was aware of his speed, but he stayed to ask for his name. It was obvious that he was confident in his speed. Bang! An explosion was heard in the sky far away, followed by a flash of light. The goshawk, who was about to jump down, paused and turned to see an arrow-shaped symbol in midair. He furrowed his eyebrows and looked at Tang Un, who was rushing toward him. Creak. The black bow in his hand made a sound, and the last fire-red arrow in his gorgeous quiver was knocked. He aimed at the north first, then he paused and aimed below. Whoosh! Given the close distance, the goshawk did not even need to look before he released the arrow. Boom! The arrow landed, and flames soared into the sky. Tang Un's body was instantly devoured. Nevertheless, the goshawk did not look relieved. He was not very confident about the arrow just now, because Tang Un had dodged it before. In fact, if it was not because his teammate called for help from afar, he would have fled the scene. He initially planned to retreat and destroy the watchtower with the arrow to stop Tang Un from pursuing him. The goshawk shook his head and quickly held his breath. He picked up a normal arrow on the other side, pulled the bowstring, aimed, and shot. Whoosh! The process was so smooth that he did not even take time to aim. It looked like a casual shot. Nonetheless, anyone who knew the goshawk's name would know that he never missed an arrow. Creak! Unknowingly, another arrow was knocked on the bow, and there were 3 of them. He pulled the bowstring and aimed. All of a sudden, the goshawk's right hand shook. Even a rookie archer knew that the hand holding the arrow should not shake, especially before the arrow was released. This was because it would affect the arrow's trajectory and cause it to miss its target. However, the goshawk, whose archery skills were superb, shook his hand at that moment. He instantly turned around and pointed the arrow backward. Before he could release the arrow, a blade light flashed in his eyes. Hiss! Bang! The bowstring was cut, and the blade light went for the goshawk's throat. Bam! The goshawk stomped on the wooden platform. Then he leaned backward and fell from the platform, which was over 10 meters high. Dying! A muffled voice was heard from above. Following that, a black figure pounced on him without any hesitation. There was no doubt that it was Tang In. However, even Josiah, who was the most familiar with him, would not be able to recognize him at the moment. First of all, he was black from head to toe. Even his white teeth could not be seen because he had inhaled too much black smoke. Secondly, he was miserable. His clothes were already in a mess from the explosion, and he was only left with a trendy pair of shorts to cover his private parts. Moreover, his exposed black skin was covered with dark red cracks, as if lava was brewing in the black soil. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The goshawk, who fell backward, threw 3 arrows at Tang In. Although they were not shot from a bow, there was no problem with their accuracy. Between the eyebrows, throat, and heart. Ding, ding, ding. Without blinking, Tang In swung his dagger and accurately deflected the arrows. Landing, the goshawk was only a few meters above the ground. Logically speaking, he should have adjusted his body and landed safely. However, looking at the torch-like eyes in front of him, the goshawk knew that if he dared to turn around, he would not be able to escape from a stab to his heart. Bang! Blood instantly appeared at the corner of the goshawk's mouth, but he could not care less at the moment. He slapped the ground and leaped backward. Swish! The dagger stabbed into the ground by a hair's breadth. Tang In fell to the ground as well. Without looking at his body, he pulled out his dagger and charged forward. Ding! The goshawk took out a dagger from his pocket and blocked Tang In's attack. Die! 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 Tang In activated his blood chi like a madman. Threads crisscrossed and enveloped the goshawk like a large net. The goshawk could not hold on any longer. His battle aura was not weak, but he devoted all his talents to the bow and arrow, so he was unfamiliar with daggers. He had no problem dealing with ordinary people, but against Tang In, who was an expert with daggers. Hiss! In less than 3 seconds, a red line cut close to the goshawk's neck. Then, Tang In emerged from behind him. I can't shoot arrows. You can't play with daggers. Hiss! Blood spurted. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 232. Don't underestimate any small decision, because it could bring about disastrous consequences. Retreat or support his teammates. Goshawk chose the latter at that moment, so he folded his wings and lay coldly on the ground. He believed that if he chose to retreat, with his decisiveness and speed, he would definitely be able to escape Tang In's pursuit. Unfortunately, he didn't have a chance to make a choice all over again. Seeing Goshawk's throat slit, Tang In heaved a sigh of relief. His body went limp, and he almost collapsed to the ground. There was no need to doubt Goshawk's strength. If Tang In could go back to a few minutes ago, he might not have had the courage to jump to the ground. Although he was lucky enough to kill Goshawk, Tang In had paid a heavy price. Putting aside the miserable external injuries, the key was the explosive power. Right now, Tang In felt a tightness in his chest, as if his internal organs had all shifted positions. What an unlucky year. Tang In sighed and shook his head gloomily. Ever since he came to the north, he had been involved in countless small battles and large battles. The injuries on his body had never healed. The sounds of fighting in the distant encampment could be heard. Tang In took a deep breath. Now was not the time to be sentimental. He leaned over and placed his dagger on Goshawk's neck. After a pause, he put the dagger away and carried Goshawk's corpse back to the encampment. In any case, Goshawk was a respectable person. He could be shameless in a life and death battle. Now that he was dead, it was better to show some respect. The situation in the encampment had changed. The soldiers on the outside had broken through the black armored men's defense. After all, they had the advantage in numbers. Even if the black armored men were made of iron, how many nails could they hit? The current chaotic battle was in the center of the south. The black armored men had gathered there and formed a thick defensive line. Among them was Wafan and the others, who were fighting fiercely. Based on the current situation, the black armored men would collapse sooner or later. Of course, this was also part of the other party's plan. Their main goal was to save the group of noble youths. In fact, if not for the sudden appearance of the terrifying Wafan, they would have succeeded. "Captain, we can't do this deal anymore. Let's retreat." At the entrance of the tunnel, a black armored man smashed a saber that was coming at him. He stared ahead and muttered to himself. Regimental commander. If one were to look at this word in a big way, it would be the commander of a regiment in an army that commanded over 1,000 soldiers in battle. Of course, the members of some small teams also call their leaders that way. Previously, Eunice had also addressed the silver-haired man as captain. From this, it could be seen that although these people were wearing the same uniform, they did not seem to be in the same group. The black armored man with the face of a middle-aged man swung his sword and sent a soldier flying. He took a deep breath and said, "There's still no signal to retreat. Hold on a little longer. What are you still holding on for?" The black armored man from before was full of anger, spitting out resentment. "Several of our brothers have died. Even a void stage cultivator has come out. When we go back this time, even if I don't want any reward, I will find the employer and chop him to pieces." Nonsense. Take someone's money and work for them. That's the rule in our line of work. The middle-aged man in black armor scolded and then took the time to look behind him. "Now, I just hope that Dusk can take care of that void stage cultivator." "I don't think so. Although Dusk is famous in the circle, if they could take care of their opponent, they wouldn't have dragged it out until now." Another black-armored man beside him interrupted and then waved the sword in his hand. "I'm the leader of the Flame Hunter group." "Brother, which group are you from? Let's work together." "Berserker Hunter group." The middle-aged man in black armor casually replied and then nodded. "Okay, then I'll leave my side to you." Is there anyone else in your group?" As he spoke, he took a step to the right. The black-armored man waved his sword and took the opportunity to attack. This change of formation was extremely short, and the Gray Coat Army soldiers were limited in strength and did not take advantage of this opportunity. "TSK, don't mention it." The black-armored man who came later shook his head. "I'm now a single leader." The middle-aged man in black armor was stunned and laughed bitterly. No wonder he found someone to partner with. It turned out that his own people were all dead. However, this was not a big deal. After all, this person's combat skills were not bad. If he joined them, the pressure would lessen. While he was thinking, the middle-aged man in black armor suddenly felt the area in front of him empty. The Tide-like soldiers had actually retreated. However, they did not retreat too far. Both sides faced each other with a few meters between them. "What's going on?" The black-armored men looked at each other in dismay. They were confused by the soldiers' actions. Even if they were retreating, they should be the ones retreating. Whoosh! The soldiers suddenly retreated to the sides and opened up a path. Then, a figure slowly walked out from behind. "Everyone, be careful. Someone's coming." This was the first thought that appeared in the middle-aged man's mind. He could not help but tighten his grip on the sword hilt in his hand. This was normal. Seeing that they could not take down the enemy after so long, it was reasonable for the enemy's commander to send an expert to help. In fact, even without his reminder, the surrounding black-armored men were already on high alert. If it was said that they did not think highly of the Gray Coat Army before, then ever since Wafan had appeared, they were now on high alert. Through the firelight, the black-armored men gradually saw the figure clearly. TSK, it was indeed an expert. Not to mention other things, just from this tall and majestic. Okay, it was a bit bloated. One could see that he was not ordinary. A person of this size walked with an imposing manner. Every heavy footstep seemed to step on the hearts of the black-armored men. After the other party took a few more steps, the black-armored men were shocked to discover that the figure was not tall and sturdy. It was because there were two people stacked on top of each other. One was walking while the other was being carried on his back. What kind of joke was this? Did you think that carrying someone on your back would double your combat strength? Tuan. Captain, something is wrong. At this moment, The expression of a black-armored man holding a heavy sword suddenly changed. He pointed forward with a trembling finger. "Look at the person on his back." "What?" The middle-aged, black-armored man frowned and narrowed his eyes. He looked at the person on his back with his head drooping to the side. "Black armor. One of our people? What was the meaning of this? Using a dead person to provoke us. And wait, why did this person look so familiar? Right at this moment, Patter. Perhaps because the position of the person on his back was wrong. The dead black-armored man's right hand suddenly drooped down. Even though he was already dead, his hand was still tightly gripping a pitch-black longbow. The bowstring was already broken, and the bow was filled with engraved feathers. It looked like a pair of stretched wings. "Eagle feather bow." The middle-aged, black-armored man cried out involuntarily. Then, he immediately shifted his gaze back to the black-armored man's face. He swallowed his saliva and spat out 2 words with difficulty. "Goshawk." They naturally knew what the eagle feather bow was. They also knew who Goshawk was. The famous Dusk was actually a hunter group, just like them. The only difference was that the other party's strength and level were much higher than theirs. If not for the fact that this mission was too difficult, they would not have had the chance to work together with Dusk. The reason why Dusk was so famous was because of the 5 powerful members in it. Goshawk was one of them. He could be said to be a legend in this field. But now, he was being casually carried here like a dead dog. Some of the black-armored men could not help but rub their eyes. They really did not dare to believe what they were seeing. Unfortunately, the eagle feather bow was still drooped down, and Goshawk was still drooping down. "Retreat! Retreat! Retreat!" Hoarse roars rang out continuously. The middle-aged, black-armored man's mind went blank. What Dusk Hunter group? What huge bounty? Get lost. This mission was not something a human could do. I want to live. In just an instant, those ferocious black-armored men disappeared without a trace. Huff, huff. Tang Yen, who had carried Goshawk's corpse back with great difficulty, was constantly panting. Then, he waved his hand and threw the corpse on the ground. "Damn, I'm so tired." Tang Yen was already regretting it. Why was he pretending? If he had known, he would have brought back a head. He waved his hand, and a soldier with a blank expression walked over. "I'm the captain of the gray space." "Huff, Tang Yen." "Hello, sir." The soldier quivered and straightened his body as he saluted. Tang Yen waved his hand and waited for his breathing to stabilize. "Brother, can I ask you for a favor?" Of course, please give the order, sir." "Okay, thank you." Tang Yen patted the soldier's shoulder, then pointed to the corpse on the ground and said, "Help me carry him, parade him on the street." After a while, the soldier carried Goshawk's corpse on his back and walked in front dizzily. Tang Yen walked behind with the help of the other soldiers. "Don't panic, walk slowly. Brother, if you're really nervous, you can stare at the ground." To be honest, carrying a corpse was not a good thing. It was not because of fear. The soldiers of the Gray Coat Army had naturally seen this before. But no matter how unscrupulous it was, the feeling of being so close to a cold, dead person was naturally not good. But now, the soldier did not feel that way at all. In fact, gradually, a huge sense of glory grew from the bottom of his heart. The people who gave him this feeling were the pale and frightened black armor men in front of him. Goshawk's corpse was a huge deterrent. Now, as long as the soldier walked in front of them, the black armor men would collapse one after another, then turn around and run away without hesitation. Without batting an eyelid, a strong enemy had been reduced to ashes. The soldier was now not panicking like before. He raised his head and puffed out his chest with a calm expression, just like a peerless expert. You're all ants. Why aren't you scramming? Look, look, look. I'm an expert. How can you tell?" It had to be said that given a suitable stage, anyone would be a successful actor. This great expert led more and more soldiers. First, he walked through the black armor men's defense line one by one. Then he began to lead them to the center. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.